Okay, so good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for coming. I am May Cinco, the National Coordinator of INET Philippines. I will be your moderator for this afternoon session. So to begin with, may I call, by the way, this webinar is a joint effort or actually initiated by the OGP Education Cluster. And it so happened that INET Philippines is the lead CSO in the OGP Education Cluster. So to start with, may I call on Flora to formally welcome everybody.
Okay. On behalf of the Open Government Partnership CSO Education Cluster, we would like to extend our warm appreciation to our champions in the government in sharing their precious time and efforts to be with us today in the webinar discourse on domestic resource mobilization through the utilization of the Special Education Fund. DepEd Yusek Jesus Lorenzo Ruiz Mateo, Director Annalisa F. Bonagua, DBM ASEC Rolando U. Toledo, and Director Ma Pamela P. Quezon, DOF Bureau of Local Fiscal Policy Service of the DOF, and to our panel of reactors, Ms. Jessica Reyes Cantos, and Ms. Maria Olivia S. Lucas. And finally, to all our participants and viewers in this Zoom meeting and in the Facebook Live. Magandang buhay para sa ating lahat. Quality basic education for all Filipinos is a basic human right embedded in the Philippine Constitution. It has also been stipulated and reaffirmed by our government. Our commitments in various international agreements, such as the Education for All, 2015 and beyond, Sustainable Development Goals, especially on SDG 4.7, and the Philippine Education 2040 to improve the quality of basic education for every Filipino, among others. Actually, it has been recorded as the highest in the budget allocation in the GAA given to education, which is about 692.6 billion out of the 4.10 trillion total national budget during the fiscal year 2020. But still, very low in terms of the 6% of GNP UNESCO benchmark. So that was a report from the Global Monitoring Report. Though basic education is largely the responsibility of the national government, we have the Local Government Code of 1991 that provides for the establishment of local school boards in every province, city, or municipality, whose major function is the management of the Special Education Fund collected by the local government units as an annual tax of 1% on the assessed value of real property, in addition to the real property tax. The role of the local school boards in providing funding support and basic education management is deemed crucial in achieving access to equitable and inclusive education for all in their respective constituencies. It is for this reason that this discourse on the domestic resource mobilization through the SEF utilization becomes the centerpiece of our webinar to help improve the state of basic education from the perspective of whole government society approach. The leadership and governance of the local school board is crucial in ensuring access to equity and inclusive quality of public education for all. It is also important to analyze the sharing of governance and financial responsibility for basic education between the national and the local government units that affect proper allocation of funds and appropriate targeting of resources. It is also very important for us to consider the uneven revenue collection in the different LGUs on their real property tax, especially located in the poor class municipalities where the last mile schools are located, and how we can assist these low-income or poor municipalities to address the education needs of the marginalized, excluded, and vulnerable learners. Now that we are confronted with COVID pandemic, all the more that we are expected to work together and pool our resources to prioritize the utilization of the Special Education Fund in meeting the critical inputs in the implementation of the Learning Continuity Plan, especially to the marginalized, excluded, and vulnerable learners in the last mile schools and throughout the country. Effective collaborative partnerships through the open government partnership among education stakeholders, the LGUs, and the national government are deemed important in coming up with appropriate policy recommendations to improve the governance of the local school board and the management of the Special Education Fund for the benefit of the Filipino children. We hope our discourse today yields fruitful insights that will serve as a springboard for our collective partnerships in working together and putting priority expenditures for public education. With that, thank you and mabuhay po tayong lahat.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Flora Arellano. So, mukhang nasabi na ni Flora ang background ng ating webinar. So, to sum it up, tatlong A, no? Una, alamin natin ano meron dito sa SEF. Pangalawa, analisahin paano natin magagamit ito ngayon sa pagpapatuloy ng ating edukasyon, lalo na sa pagbibigay ng edukasyon sa sinasabi niyang marginalized, excluded, and vulnerable learners. Yun, pag naalanilisan na natin, aksyonan. Ano ang pwede nating maging aksyon mula dito sa webinar na ito? Sa panig ng ating pamahalaan, sa panig ng mga pribadong organisasyon, at sa panig ng mga katulad nating mga civil society organization. At yun nga, nagpapasalamat si Flora na full house tayo ngayon. Tuwang-tuwa kami, lahat ng ahensya na involved sa SEF ay nagpaunlak sa webinar na ito. Sumasaludo kami ngayon pa lang. So to start, para malawak na ang ating talakayan at mahaba ang ating talakayan, itong unang ating speaker, dahil nga we are looking into SEF, how to utilize it in this learning continuity plan. So mula ito sa Department of Education. Ang mama pong ito, sorry Yusek, I'm addressing you as mama. So para wag naman tayong masyadong stiff and sobrang formal. So lagi kaming pinapaunlakan sa mga nagiging activity ng INET. So sa maraming paglalakbay ng INET noong paman, hindi kami binibigo ng mamang ito. So he's truly a USEC of DepEd. So for our first speaker, of course, the Undersecretary Jesus Mateo. So let me just introduce him to you, kahit kilala nyo na, but so USEC Mateo, he provides the overall supervision, direction, and guidance in the strategic implementation of national policies, the planning service, and the Bureau of Human Resources and Organizational Development. Ako po ba yung maingay? O para naman maganda ang ating pagkakilala kayo? Hello, our technical staff. Can we lessen the noise, please? Saan po kaya nagagaling? Pwede pong i-request na pa-mute muna natin yung ating mga audio. Okay. Pa-mute po natin. So after po kasi, meron tayong 4 speaker for today, tapos meron tayong 2 panelists, at meron pong from the participants magbibigay ng kanyang reaksyon mula sa anay ng guro. At finally, bibigyan tayo ng ating kasamang si Jet for the overall mga challenges, way forward. So ayan, para naman maganda ang pagpapakilala kay Yusek Mateo. So I just repeat Yusek kasi medyo na tayo ng noise. So I repeat again. So Yusek Mateo provides the overall supervision, direction, and guidance in the strategic implementation of national policies of the Planning Service and the Bureau of Human Resource and Organizational Development, comprising the division and the units of the following: Human Resource and Development, Organizational Effectiveness of the Division, School Effectiveness Division, and the Personnel Division, and also the Employees Welfare Division. He has served the government in various capacities for 3 decades, 30 years. His expertise includes policy formulation and analysis, planning and policy coordination, investment programming, project development and management, program monitoring and evaluation, conceptualization and management of policies and programs focus on upholding professional standards for teachers and promoting employees' welfare and benefit. Yusek Mateo completed his Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy from the University of the Philippines, obtained Master of Public Administration degree from the University of the Philippines also, in NCPAG particularly, obtained Masters of Business in Government and Business Management from the Victoria University in Australia, and conferred a doctorate degree in Public Administration honoris causa at the Pangasinan State University, Lingayen, Pangasinan. So Yusek Mateo will give us his topic about domestic resource mobilization for the learning continuity plan through the utilization of the SEF. So samahan niyo ko mga kasama. Let's welcome Yusek Mateo. Yusek Mateo, you have the floor now.
Maraming salamat, May. Siguro hindi ka naabisuhan ni Ma'am Flora. Gusto ko introduce lang ako as Jess Mateo. Maliit na nga ako, biglang nanliit pa ako sa introduction mo. Anyway, gaano kahaba yung oras na ibibigay mo sa akin? Kasi meron
20 minutes?
Ako, 20 minutes. Kung pwede, meron akong presentation. Dalawa po yon. Yung una, para nang mabigyan kayo ng update where we are as far as the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan, para siguro ma-situate natin yung discussion natin doon sa SEF. So after that presentation, 12 slides lang naman po yung una, at yung pangalawa po, 12 rin po. 16 slides. Kung okay lang po sa inyo yun. Ma'am May, okay lang ba?
Yes, okay, go on please. Yes, go on please.
Okay lang po yon. If you will allow me to share yung slides ko po, pwede po ba?
Yes, Bear po. Kailangan po yan.
Pwede po bang payagan nyo ako i-share yung screen ko?
Yes, sir. Yes, Yusek.
Hindi ko po ma-share eh. Ayan.
Ay, hindi.
Ayan, okay na. Sige.
Okay na po. If you need assistance, sabihin
natin.
Po.
Nakikita nyo na po?
Yes po. Clear. Handang isip, handang bukas.
Sige, ihinto ko muna yung video ko para naka-focus tayo dito sa presentation. Okay. Kung maalala nyo, doon sa mga nagsubaybay, no? Doon sa ating dry run simulation, yung kick-off natin noong August 10. That was a Monday. This Monday lang po. Handang isip, handang bukas ang ating tema. No? Pinapakita natin dito kung ganong kahanda tayo para magkaroon ng awareness ang publiko. Ano ba yung mga preparasyon na ginagawa natin? Pangalawa, gusto rin po nating na iparating sa ating publiko yung mga effort na ginawa ng ating mga partners like non-government organizations, civil society groups, local government units, and so on. But before that, let me just recognize yung ating mga kasamahan from the public sector. Unang-una dito si yung kaibigan ko si Asek Rolly Toledo ng DBM, si Director Ana Bunagwan ng ating DILG. Sila po ay matatagal na nating kasama. At syempre, doon sa laging nag-invite sa atin si Flora. Alam niyo po, pareho kami galing sa UP. Kaya po hindi pa uso yung pag-engage ng non-government organization. Sinimulan na po natin yan. Be that as it may, ang isa pang sukatan po natin doon sa paghahanda ay yung enrollment na tinatawag natin. For school year 2019-2020, kasi yan po yung pinagbasehan natin, ang enrollment natin previous year ay 27,768,000 learners. At the moment po, nasa kuha na tayo 22.2 million. That represents already close to about, to be exact, 83.57%. Ito po yung detalye niyan, hindi ko na po masyadong i-discuss to. Makikita nyo naman po yung ating breakdown in terms of kinder, elementary, junior high, senior high, even the learners with disabilities and alternative learning. Kung titignan naman natin po doon sa public school, that represents about 95% of the previous school year. Or to be exact, 95.57%. Ang medyo challenging sa atin yung private school kasi nasa kon pa lang sila 1.5 million as compared to 4.3 million in the past school year. That represents about 37.12%. Alam niyo naman na itong pandemya na to, hindi lamang ang edukasyon, ang sektor ng edukasyon ang naapektuhan, pati po yung hanap buhay ng mga tao. Kung titignan niyo po, may mga OFW, Overseas Filipino Workers, na nagbalikan po, bumalik po sa Pilipinas dahil nga po yung mga bansa kung saan sila nagtatrabaho ay naapektuhan din. Okay. Just a quick representation ng ating enrollment. Makikita nyo, majority pa rin ay from public, a little bit from private. Meron po sa SUCs, mas lalo na sa usapin ng senior high school at saka ALS. Okay. Pinesent na po to ni Yusek Nepo during the Education Forum. And part of the reflection po ay yung learning continuity plan na ginawa po ng ating kagawaran sa pamamagitan ng consultation with our directors, with our superintendent, with our school heads. This LCP prevents 1 year of education. Kung makikita nyo nga sa enrollment natin, nagpapatunay yan na 23 million will continue to be educated in one modality or the other. Tapos po, accepted natin ang reality that the learning continuity plan will be difficult and challenging to implement. Dahil lang ginawa natin po dito, tinignan natin yung mga components ng LCP para meron naman tayong sukatan kung talagang ready ba tayo ay hindi. So, unang-una dito yung enrollment, no? Makikita nyo naman na maganda yung enrollment natin bagamat hindi 100% from the previous school year, but that is expected. Sa katunayan nga noon, nung hiningian tayo ng NEDA kung ano yung magiging target natin for school year, sinabi na natin na 80% lang of the previous school year. Dahil nga may madaming unknowns. Pagdating naman sa usapin ng curriculum, na-report na rin po natin to, na part of the RA 10533, kailangan po naman talaga ang kagawaran, inatasan na i-review yung curriculum natin para maging relevant. So napabilis lang po yung review such that the number of competencies from K to 12 po ay ni-review ng curriculum and instruction at nag-focus na lang tayo sa most essential learning competencies without deviating from our mindset na bigyan natin ng 21st century skills yung mga kabataan. Pangatlo po, yung nag-isip tayo ng iba-ibang mga modalities sa paghatid ng pag-aaral. Ito po ay ayon rin doon sa mga konsultasyon na ginanap hindi lamang sa kagawaran kundi sa mga stakeholders through the Education Forum platform. At maliban doon, gumawa rin po tayo ng mga pag-aaral through surveys at tinanong natin kung ano po yung mga pamamaraan na gusto nilang mahatid yung pag-aaral. Yung result po ng survey na yon, pinapakita, majority pa rin, ang gusto yung modular learning. Yung iba naman ay tinatawag nating blended, kasama na dito yung face-to-face. Pero sabi nga ng ating Pangulo at ng kagawaran, walang mangyayaring face-to-face hanggat hindi nakakahanap ng vaccine. Kung sakasakali magkakaroon ng face-to-face, ay base yan doon sa decision ngayon ng ating Presidente as recommended by the Interagency Task Force. Yung learning resources po natin, maliban doon sa mga existing textbook, gumawa rin po tayo ng mga self-learning modules at on the basis of the self-learning modules, kasi nag-adjust tayo ng mga competencies, yan po ang paggagamitin naman o pagbabasihan ng paggagawa ng mga audio and video materials natin. Natural, dahil nagbawas tayo ng competencies, nag-adjust tayo ng curriculum, natural na magbabago rin yung assessment natin. Siyempre, hindi natin kakalimutan yung pagsasanay ng ating mga guro. Kaya isa rin po yan sa component natin. Pito, yung resource mobilization. Ang isang tinignan natin, yung budget na meron tayo based on the GAA, no? At hindi lang yon, tinignan rin natin kung ano pa yung budget na pwedeng gamitin para ma-implement yung learning continuity plan natin from the local government units. So these are all government funds. But we do realize that given the pandemic, no, hindi kakayanin ng pamahalaan yan kasi sa health sector pa lang malaki na ang pangangailangan. Kaya po ang ginawa natin doon sa annual brigada eskwela natin, imbis na mag-compete tayo, ang ginawa po natin ay in-step up po natin yung building partnership. Doon sa learning continuity plan po natin, ang isang prinsipyo na sinusunod natin, the basic principle, is to ensure the health and safety of our learners, our teachers, and our employees. Kaya nga po, nung Mayo pa lang, naglabas na tayo ng department order ng health standards ayon po sa IATF, DOH, pati World Health Organization. At na-realize rin natin na hindi natin ma-implement ng yung learning continuity plan natin using one size fits all concept. Kailangan pong i-contextualize natin to. Pangalawa po, syempre, let's admit it, bagamat merong challenge sa quality, kailangan po natin panatiliin yung quality na yan. Ano? Number 2, ang tingin namin po doon sa learning continuity plan, it's not just an emergency response to what is happening. We think and we feel that this is an investment to the future. Kaya nga po, isa sa mga tinitignan natin yung paggawa po ng Futures Thinking Group na pinamumunuan ni Yusek Nepo Malaluan at ni Secretary. Ito po yung mga iba-ibang reflection, hindi ko na iisa-isahin para mapunta na tayo doon sa topic natin. But just to say that yung aming lakas po ay nanggagaling doon sa resilience ng aming DepEd partners, DepEd family po. Sa katunayan nga po, halos sa linggo-linggo, halos sa every other day, nagmi-meeting ang Excom pati Mancom para lang masiguro na maihatid natin yung pag-aaral ng mga pupunta na ako po doon sa susunod kong slides. Okay. Pwede po ba mag-share ulit ng slide?
Yes, Yusek, please.
Okay, thank you. And ito po, ginamit po to ni Yusek Ann Sevilla nung August 10 po, nung nakipag-meeting sila sa League of Cities of the Philippines in partnership with the COVID Action Network. Ang presentation po na to ay 3 parts. The first part is just to provide you with the background and the legal basis. And then we jump into the proposed amendments of the current joint circular of DepEd, DILG, DBM. And then finally, just to give you additional information on the current SEF. With that, let me now begin. So, kagaya ng nabanggit ko, na component ng Learning Continuity Plan ay yung tinatawag nating resource mobilization. And part of that resource mobilization is really harnessing the potential of the Special Education Fund as a complementary resource to finance the Learning Continuity Plan. Just to announce to you, ang DILG po, thank you Director Ana and sa Secretary Anyo, tsaka kay Yusek Malaya. Mabilis nilang in-issue itong DILG Memorandum Circular number 2020-96 dated 26 June 2020 to support the Oplan Balik Eskwela. Kasi doon sa Balik Eskwela po natin, kasama dito po yung engagement not only of government agencies but also from the other sectors. Yung SEF po was created by virtue of RA 5447 and then subsequently by RA 7160, yung Local Government Code. Hindi ko na po iisa-isahin to kasi alam niyo naman kung ano yung ibig sabihin ng Special Education Fund. Meron po tayong existing ngayon na Joint Circular number 1, Series 2016. Tungkol po sa paggamit ng SEF para sa DepEd. No? Ang isa na nga po ditong budgetary item na pwedeng paggamitan ng SEF ay yung operation and maintenance of public school, construction and repair of school buildings, facilities and equipment, education research, purchase of books and periodicals, sports development, and funding of early childhood care and development. Pero dahil nga may mga batas na nagsasabi na kailangan i-pondohan ng SEF, ito po ay meron tayong amendment ngayon para ma-include yung sa National Feeding Program, Dental Care Program, and Scouting Activities. Kasama na po dito yung RA 1137, yung masustansyang pagkain para sa batang Pilipino. Ilang beses na po nagpulong ang DILG, DBM, pati ang DepEd po para i-propose po yung a number of items and spell out the items included in the joint circular po. Makikita nyo dito sa slide natin, patungo doon sa operation and maintenance, ang pinopropose po namin kasama na dito yung mga items articulated in the Learning Continuity Plan. For example, ito po yung mga health and sanitation, mga learning modules, mga purchase of external storage, communication expenses, so on and so forth. Pagdating naman sa construction and repair of school building, gusto po sana natin isama dito yung installation ng mga health areas and facilities. Like for example, yung mga hand washing facilities kung sakali po mag-face-to-face na tayo. And then as far as facilities and equipment, kasama po dito yung mga TV, radio, printer, scanner, laptops, tablets, and so on, including yung purchase ng mga solar panels para doon sa mga unenergized communities po. Sa purchase of books and periodicals, sinasama po natin dito yung mga e-books, modules, at saka activity sheets. Now, ito po yung last part na just a quick data information on the SEF. No? The one we received from DOF and the one we collected, meaning DepEd. No? So makikita nyo po dito, for 2017, ang na-receive po natin ay 24.9 billion. In 2018, 24.6. Pero pagdating ng 2019, bumaba po yan. Makikita nyo rin po yung expense class na pinanggamitan ng ating SEF. Dito po, yung MOE got a big share, then capital outlay is smaller portion. Okay, now, in terms of the comparison between what data DOF, BILG collected and DepEd, makikita nyo po sa as far as mas itong DOF po, malaki po yung SEF receipts nila in terms of expenditure na halos well, little bit over than 60% no of the what was collected. Okay. Pa lang to, detailed presentation yan by region nung kaninang slides natin. And then, that's it. Thank you po for listening.
Thank you, Yusek Mateo. So, we're happy na meron ng joint circular ang DILG, DepEd at saka DBM. So, and also to inform us ano yung laman ng joint memorandum na yon. So, participants, please just write your questions in the chat box. So, we can address it later to the speaker. Okay, so bigyan naman natin ng ating tradisyon sa CSO, bigyan natin ng isang big clap o isang bagsak si Yusek Mateo. 1, 2, 3, go! Parang hindi ko narinig Anyway, sige, sabay-sabay. Okay, one more time. 1, 2, 3, go! Okay, ayun. May narinig na tayong sound. So, salamat po. Please stand by, Yusek, Okay lang po? Okay. Sige, nabanggit ni Yusek Mateo ang mga pangangailangan ng DepEd for the Learning Continuity Plan. So, tignan naman natin paano ilalapat ito sa budget. No? So, kaya ang ating susunod na magsasalita ay from the DBM. Ito, suking-suking na rin namin sa OGP. At syempre, dahil siya po ang head ng secretariat ng OGP. But let me introduce him to you formally. So our next speaker is no other than Assistant Secretary Rolando Toledo of the Department of Budget and Management. He is also the head of the Secretariat of the Open Government Partnership. So, he directly oversees the fiscal planning reforms of the Department of Budget and Management. He supervises the operation of FPRV in its conduct of fiscal policy research and planning, development and fiscal and budgeting frameworks, including the multi-year and annual budget ceilings and forward estimates, pati mga estimates, no? Formulation of annual and quarterly whole of government allotment and cash release programs, and monitoring of macroeconomic developments and their impact on budget. So talagang lahat ng budget natin sa bansa. He also supervises the policy analysis being undertaken by the Bureau to underpin budgetary policy recommendations towards the efficient allocation of resources subject to a fair distribution of income and stable macroeconomic environment. He works as a chief secretariat of the Development Budget Coordination Committee and its Executive Technical Board. His recent assignment include being the Chief Secretariat of the Participatory Governance Cluster, kaya nasa OGP din tayo, of the Cabinet and the Supervision of Philippine Open Government Partnership Secretariat. As added responsibilities of various committees and technical working group of the government such as, ito po ang mga kanyang pinagkakaabalahan, the Infrastructure Cluster, the Human Development and Poverty Reduction Cluster, Climate Change Adaptation, Commission Advisory Board, Mining Industry Coordinating Council, and the Economic Development Cluster, Cabinet Assistance System, among others. So marami pa. He is also the department's deputy to the Interagency Task Force on Emerging Infectious Disease o yung ating ano ngayon, IATF, EID, yeah. And the National Task Force Against COVID-19. So, ganun ka-busy ang mamang ito. Asek Toledo graduated from the University of the East. Hindi ko na sasabihin ng year. Magkaedad ata kami. Earning a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration. He became a certified public accountant a year after and took a program in development economics from the University of the Philippines School of Economics. He has attended various international workshops and conferences in Asia and Europe. So, ladies and gentlemen, Asek Toledo will speak to us about the utilization of special education fund. So, good afternoon, Asek Toledo. You have the floor now.
Wow. Thank you, Ma'am May. Para rin akong si ano niya na si Yusek Mate, nanitin ako sa sinabi. Anyway, salamat po for your kind introduction, for the generous introduction. At magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat, lalo na from my colleagues from the government sector and also my colleagues from DBM who are here supporting me also. And thank you for that introduction again, Ma'am May. Okay, thank you for inviting us to join here in today's webinar. So as assigned to us, our TOR here for this afternoon is to discuss to you on how the utilization of the Special Education Fund or the SEF. So we will try to see how this can reach and better support the marginalized and learners, especially during these difficult times. I saw kanina doon sa chat box from the National PTA Philippines. Parang sabi nila kanina doon sa chat box ay parang mga PTAs hindi pa nila alam daw yung about a special education fund. I hope this forum will give you an idea or learn from this webinar of what is the special education fund. Okay. Now, so my presentation consists of 4 parts, starting with a short background on the SEF, followed by a discussion on the revision of the use of the SEF under DBM, DepEd, DIALG, Joint Circular Number 1, Series of 2017, and we'll also be discussing the 2 proposed Joint Circular 2020 aimed at responding to the effects of the pandemic and adapting to the new normal. I guess basically naisabi na rin kanina na-mention na rin at presented na rin ni Yusek Mateo yung the proposed joint circular. Anyway, so as a brief background, yan nabanggit na rin niya kanina, just to reiterate para sa ating mga TA na umaattend ngayon. So the Special Education Fund was created and established pursuant to Section 235, Chapter 5 of the Local Government Code of 1991. So under this code, a province or city or municipality within the Metro Manila area may levy and collect an annual tax of 1% of the assessed value of real property in addition to the basic real property tax. So sinasabi rin natin dito, the corresponding tax revenues exclusively accrued to the Special Education Fund. So the SEF shall be automatically released to the local boards, school boards, all LSBs under sections 272 of RA number 7160. Okay, so yan po yon. So in the case of province, the proceeds shall be divided equally between the provincial and municipal school boards. Okay, so I'm still in slide Ison. You can go back still. No, next. Yan, that's it. So the SEF shall be allocated for, yun rin, nabanggit kanina rin ni Yusek Mateo, just to emphasize, the operations and maintenance of public schools, construction and repair of school buildings, facilities and equipment, educational research, purchase of books and periodicals, then sports development as determined and approved by the local school board. Okay. However, Section 100C, next slide, of the same law states that the annual school board budget shall give priority to the following. Ito naman na yung under this section. Construction, repair, and maintenance of school buildings and other facilities of public elementary and secondary schools. Establishment and maintenance of extension classes where necessary, and sports activities at the division, district, municipal, and barangay level. So mga PTA, take note of this. Okay. Now, the next slide, ito po yung timeline lang naman po. To prescribe the rules and regulation of the utilization of the SEF, the local school boards, by the local school board, ito po yung nakasaad po sa Joint Circular Number 1, Series of 1998. Inisyu po yan by then the Department of Education, of course, the DBM and DILG on April 14, 1998. Okay. So over the years, more provisions were added to supplement the said joint circular. Yan po yung one of this is the joint circular number 01-A series 2000, which requires local school boards to report the status of their SEF budget and utilization. Now, more provisions were issued in 2001 regarding the payment of salaries and authorized allowances to non-teaching personnel and teachers hired to handle new extension classes in public elementary and secondary schools. Okay. Now, ngayon, puntahan naman po natin yung revised guidelines on the use of the SEF. So, ngayon po, there was a refocus, or we want to reiterate and refocus that policies on the use of the SEF, given the current developments in the basic education subsector, particularly in the institutionalization of the K-12 and early childhood care and development, or the ECCD programs. So I think nabanggit na rin natin ni Yusek Mateo to. So thus, on January 19, 2017, a new joint circular was issued to revise the guidelines on the utilization of the SEF and better support the supplementary budgetary needs of schools and learning centers. So the joint circular ensures a more strategic and efficient utilization of resources for priority education programs and projects, which would complement and reinforce the education budgeting priorities. Now, ito po yun, the revised guidelines of the SEF, ito po, expanded the allowable expense items of the SEF, as mentioned kanina early. It now include programs, activities, and projects enumerated under the earlier Act of 2013. Okay, so ito po yung coverage. Okay, so ito po yung mga allowable expenses. One is direct service related to implementation of the early child care development program, such as salaries, allowances of locally hired child development teachers and or daycare workers. Also, the organization and support of parents cooperatives to establish community-based ECCD programs, provision of counterpart funds for the continuing professional development of ECCD public service providers, provision of facilities for the product of the ECCD programs, and payment of expenses pertaining to the operation of national child development centers, including but not limited to utilities. Okay. Now, paano nga ba yung how is the use of, how do we utilize the SEF? Okay. First, para sa ating mga PTA members na nandito, first, the local school boards shall formulate a 3-year program indicating strategic prioritization of policies in the allocation of the SEF to public schools. So basically, the program must take into consideration equitable sharing, priority needs of the school, and other factors that such as enrollment ratio, school performance, dropout rate, as well as the location of public schools. And moreover, prior to the formulation of and preparation its annual budget of public schools for the incoming year, okay, local schools, kailangan natin may objectives of the LGUs. For a while, okay lang, hanggang dyan na lang po. Okay. Then DepEd, representative of the local school board, shall ensure that school improvement plan and division education plan are formulated collaboratively with stakeholders in the community. And who are the stakeholders? Okay, alam niyo naman, kasama po lahat kayo kung sino yung mga nandito ngayon. So basically, the local school board in each province, cities, or municipality shall be responsible for the preparation of the annual budgetary requirements of public schools for their implementation of the Eccd program. So all expenditure items to be included in the SEF budget shall be among those provided under Section 4 of the GMC and contained in the approved SIP and DEDP. So the special SEF budget shall be presented by programs, activities, and projects by allotment class and per school, and most importantly, complement or supplement the budget of the National Education Program. So it's really, this is a complementation of what the national program is rather providing. So specifically, yung SCF budget po natin, siya as much as possible, ito yung pag-filling the gap lang, the needs of all the public schools in the province. So after formulation of the SEF, ano ginagawa? This shall be reviewed and deliberated, of course, by the local school board. So the approval of the SEF budget depends on the affirmative vote of the majority of all members pursuant to Section 100B of the Local Government Code. So an NLSB resolution will be then issued, signed by the chair and the co-chair. So the preparation and approval of the SEF budget po for the ensuing year are guided by the schedule of activities prescribed in the joint circular. So ganyan po yung prepare planning as to the budgeting phase. Now, in terms of utilization disbursement of the SEF, consistent with the utilization and disbursement of government funds, the utilization, next slide please, and disbursement of the SEF shall be in accordance with the existing budgeting and accounting and auditing rules and regulation. So, meanwhile po, procurement charge against SEF shall follow, of course, the rules and procedures under RA 9184 or the Government Procurement Reform Act. Now, in terms of transparency and accountability, and as that is what also being promoted by the OGP, so the allocation and utilization of the SEF, the local school board concerned shall comply with the following. Yan po yan, nakalagay dyan po. Number 1 is furnish the local budget officer, accountant, and treasurer of the copy of the SEF budget as basis for disbursement or certification of availability of funds and for recording purposes. And number 2, submit quarterly and annual reports using the SEF budget accountability form on SEF utilization as prescribed by the local accountant to the DepEd CO through appropriate channels, copy furnished the local sanggunian concerned and regional offices of the DBM and DILG. And number 3, post the utilization report of the SEF budget in the website of the LGU and or in at least 3 conspicuous public places for transparency and accountability in compliance with the full disclosure policy of the DILG. Okay, moving on. In view of the passage of the Masustansyang Pagkain para sa Batang Pilipino Act or the Republic Act number 11037 and to amplify the policies of the use of the SEF, better support the supplementary budget needs of schools and learning centers, Additional expenses are likewise allowed to be charged against the SEF as may be determined and approved by the local school board. So talaga napakalaking role po ang LSB. So this is in addition to those already authorized under DepEd, DBM, DILG Joint Circular Number 1 Series of 2017. So may I just inform you, as mentioned also by Yusek Mateo, there were several meetings and discussions conducted by between and among DBM, DepEd, and DILG to finally coming up with the final draft of the proposed DBM-DILG Joint Circular Number 1 2020. So just for an update, ito po ay napirmahan na po ng DBM and DepEd. So we're appealing for our partner from the DILG para mapirmahan na po in full itong ating joint circular na ito. Now, relative to the COVID-19 outbreak, next slide. And in response to public health emergency, again, the DepEd developed a basic education learning community plan, ELCP, as kanina demonstrated or rather presented by Yusek Mateo, which aims to ensure learning continuity amid the pandemic by providing safe learning opportunities through blended distance learning modalities, among others. So next slide. This regard, a new joint circular, susunod po, yan, is being proposed by the DepEd, DBM, and DILG. Pakiangat po ng konti. The circular aims to include necessary items for blended distance learning under the allowable expenses chargeable against the SEF. So ito na po yung kasamang expenses. As mentioned also, I think may Yusek Mateo din. One is the production of self-learning instruction materials, computer and other ICT equipment and gadgets, internet connectivity, personal protective gear or equipment, trainings of teachers and parents, water and sanitation facilities, as well as hygiene and cleaning paraphernalia. So, yun po yung ating mga additional items of expenses. Now, ito naman po, yung ating mga following expenses items were actually po yung mga yon were requested by public schools. So, yan po. So, basically, the proposed addendum highlights the inclusion of the PPAs required for the effective implementation of the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan. So it also includes PPAs for the safety and protection, of course, of both the school personnel and the students. So that is all from our end. If we have some questions later, I have here with us, also in the room is our director of our LGRC, Director RS, to help us in answering your questions. Thank you and good afternoon.
Wait lang po. Thank you, Asek Toledo, for giving us the information about the utilization of SEF. Actually, may mga question and feedback na sa chat box, pero later, after the fourth speaker, please participants, just bear with us, please. Okay. So to continue our discussion, let me call the next speaker. So, kasi apat po na ahensya yung gusto nating pakinggan. So, para din buo yung ating pakikinig. And then later, we will go to question and answer. Okay, pagtapos po ng dalawang mama, may dalawa naman po tayong ale. Mga magagandang babae. Ang una po ay si Director Analisa Bonagua. Nakakasama po namin siya sa LCC. Hi, Ma'am Lisa. So, from the Bureau of Local Government and Development, or DILG. So, Director Bonagua leads the development and formulation of policies and programs for the capacity development of local government units, or the LGUs. She supervises several programs to enhance capacities of local government for greater autonomy, to pursue local economic development, and to encourage good performance through a performance incentive programs such as the ease of doing business and improving competitiveness of LGUs, performance challenge fund, rationalizing local planning and mainstreaming DRR and CAA, or the climate change adaptation, in the local development planning, gender responsive local governance, SDG localization, and establishment of community-based monitoring system, among others. Excuse me po. Okay. She leads the implementation of different projects supported by UNDP, ADB, and AusAid, such as local governance and budget reform program, poverty environment initiative, and review of the local government code. So under review. So she holds a bachelor degree in statistics and a master degree of public administration, major in local and regional development from the University of the Philippines. So she will talk to us about the monitoring of LGU utilization and special education plan and the proposed innovations. Ma'am, marami pong tanong sa chat box tungkol dyan. So, Ma'am Lisa, you have the floor now. Good
Maraming
afternoon.
salamat, Ms. May. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Thank you for inviting the ILG for this important event. Well, the title of my presentation, Special Education Supporting Delivery of Quality Basic Education, but then with emphasis on the monitoring. There will be some overlap in the presentation that I will be doing with the presentation of the first two gentlemen kanina, no? Si Yusek Jess at saka si Asek Toledo. So, simulan ko siguro why good education matters. Seconds, can you please share my screen? Okay, thank you. So, sa next slide, why education matters? Bakit ba palaging ang education has the biggest share in the national budget? From a data, medyo luma na yung data namin, but it's 2006. This came from a study that we asked EDB with Dr. Manasan to conduct, particularly for SEF. So sa data na to, pinapakita that educational attainment of household head is important determinant of the poverty status of the household. And that poverty incidence is found to be higher among households with household head with lower educational attainment. So therefore, education has a very important role in the economic status of the household and of course, achievement of the economic growth of the country. So that is the reason why, next slide, in the Philippines, the government put premium in promoting basic education for all. In fact, nasa Constitution natin yan, Section 55, tama ba yun? Article 19 of the 1987 Constitution, which specifically provides that the state shall give the highest budgetary priority to education. Dito sa slide, dito sa chart, makita nyo, for the last 3 years, this is, the date is 2016, 17, and 18, but I think hanggang 2019 to 2020, even before those years, the education sector gets the biggest share in the national budget of the Philippines. As a result, next slide po, DepEd, well, the education sector, most particularly DepEd, kasi pinakamalaki naman ang DepEd sa education sector, always get the lion's share of the national budget. For 2020, actually, the education sector still receives the highest allocation of a total budget. Tama ba yung figures ko? Asek Toledo, of 692.6 billion. And the DepEd, from this is the education sector, no? So for the DepEd receives around 521 billion, which comprise 82% of that entire education budget or the education sector allocation. So makita po natin, these are the activities funded by that budget. So merong budget for basic education facilities, flexibility learning options, madrasa education, government assistance and subsidies, school-based reading program, last mile program, and programs for education quality. For the basic education facilities, kasama dito yung construction of school buildings, classroom repair and rehabilitation, school furnitures, electrification, textbook, and other instructional materials. While doon sa last item, yung program for education quality, kasama dito yung DepEd computerization, human resource development, learning tools and equipment, new school personnel, and positions, and then textbook and other instructional materials. So yan po yung ganyan po ang pag-priority natin sa education. So we're giving DepEd the biggest chunk of the budget of the national government. So, but then, ano naman ang role ng local government units in basic education? No, despite the evolution under the local government code, there are some provision that provide education, but then basic education is still largely the responsibility of the central government delivered through DepEd kasi hindi siya fully devolved service. However, local government units provide supplementary support and funding to public basic education. Under Section 17, sinasabi doon as part of the basic services and facilities assigned to local government units, LGU should also support school buildings and other facilities for public elementary and secondary schools. So that's Section 17 of the Local Government Code. The LGUs can also should also provide supplementary finance to public basic education through the Special Education Fund. So it has been discussed lengthily also by our two gentlemen earlier. The SEF is a additional 1% to the tax being charged to the real property tax. So that is for local government code section 235. So therefore, dahil dito, the LGUs, though education is not a devolved service, the LGUs have a means to contribute to the improvement of basic education outcomes through efficient and effective use of the Special Education Fund. Next slide po. Nakalalawang slide na po yata. Yan. So yun po yung discuss ko earlier. Then next slide. So, well, this has been discussed lengthily naman. Well, gusto lang natin point out that the Special Education Fund is a fund generated by local government units. Parang ano to, piggyback to the real property tax. So that's 1% of the real property tax imposed on us. Lahat tayo na may-ari ng property in the locality. We contribute to the Special Education Fund. The Special Education Fund, as mentioned also earlier, should be automatically released to the local school board. So hindi po ito dumadaan ng deliberation from the local sanggunian. Binibigay po agad ito sa school board at sila ang nagbabudget for this. Okay, next slide po. And then the next slide talks about where the SEF should be utilized. So the SEF utilization is authorized under the local government code for very specific purposes. There are two provisions under the law, that is Section 100 and Section 272, that provides a list or enumeration of the possible activities where SEF can be used. So dalawa po yung provisions under the law. Hindi naman sila exactly the same, but they are actually similar. Paano ba sasabihin niya? So, dun po sa Section 10, sabi niya, construction, repair, and maintenance of school buildings and other facilities of public, elementary, and secondary schools. And then second is establishment and maintenance of extension classes where necessary. And then third is the sports activities at the division, district, municipal, and barangay levels. While Section 272 provides another list, almost similar but medyo mas mas detalye. First is operation and maintenance of public school, construction and repair of school buildings, facilities and equipment, education research, purchase of books and periodicals, and sports development. So yun po. SEF income has been growing through the years. So kung lumalaki po yung real property tax ng local government units, yung collection nila, lumalaki din dapat yung SEF. So next slide talks about the school board. So may pondo, sino naman ang gagalaw para ma-implement ang mga activities o para magamit naman yung pondo na ito. So the local government has provision on a local school board. This is one among the local special bodies under the local government code. So under section 99 of the local government code, ang school will be the body primarily responsible for allocating the share of the local government units in the special education fund. So, and the school board shall be composed of the local chief executive as the chair and the division superintendent or district supervisor as co-chair. At nandito din yung list of members niya, chairman of the education committee of the Sanggunian, local treasurer, representative ng Federation ng Sanggunian Kabataan, duly elected president of the Federation of Parent Teachers Association, duly elected representative of the Teachers Organization, and duly elected representative of non-academic personnel in the local government units. Ito po yung required members. Pwede pong kung tingin ng mga local government units ay kailangan nila na iba pang member. Ang LSB is mandated, ano yung main role niya, main function, to determine the allocation of the school board budget and to authorize the treasurer to distribute funds for the SEF. O kung nakalagay na sa plano, meron na silang resolution sa budget, pwede na nilang i-distribute dun sa implementing office kung sino man yung dapat mag-implement. The LSB is also mandated to act as the advisory committee to the Sanggunian on education matters. So when there are deliberation, maybe probably for policies related to education matters, dapat represented ng local school board, and even probably for budget for education, kasi pwede namang magbigay ng local government units ng budget from other source like sa kanyang local development fund or sa regular funds of the local government units for education-related concerns. Okay, next slide. Still on the role of the local school board. Next slide po. So the school board should meet. Nawala yata ang aking PowerPoint. The school board should meet every once a month or as often as necessary. The local chief executive concerned, well, as a matter of protocol, shall be given the preference to preside over the meetings, while the division superintendent, city superintendent, or district supervisors shall prepare the budget for the school board concerned. Yan po, yan, tama. Okay, so such budget shall be supported by programs and projects and activities of the school board for the ensuing fiscal year. And then the affirmative vote of one of the majority of all members shall be necessary to approve the budget kasi provision po ito ng local government code. Okay, next. Well, it has been discussed earlier, no, yung mga guidelines. Gusto ko lang pong i-emphasize that the SEF guidelines of DILG, DBM, and DepEd, yung most recent, which is 2007-1, just parang clarify or provide specificity dun sa mga provision under the law. Kasi hindi naman tayo pwedeng lumayo dun sa what is provided for under the law. So yung mga nagtatanong, allow ba ito? Ang tanong po uli namin, yun ba ay pwedeng pumasok sa mga allowable expenses under the law? So, ito po yung mga allowable expenditure under the law. Yung 1 to 5, yan po yung nakalagay dun sa section 272 of the local government code. Operation, maintenance of public school, construction, facilities and equipment, educational research, and purchase of books. So, yun dun po sa, yung sa 2017, sorry, Joint Memorandum Circular, medyo in-specify lang, clarify yung mga items that they want to see there, which are under those allowable items. For example, operation and maintenance of public schools, so payment of compensation and allowances of teachers because they are part of the operation and maintenance of school, payment of salaries and wages, payment of expenses pertaining to the operation of the schools, for the construction, kasama yan, construction, repair, and maintenance, plus acquisition and titling of school sites. Then for facilities and equipment, laboratory, technical, similar apparatus, and information technology, etc. Equipments, di ba? For educational research, any educational research subject to DepEd guidelines and policies as long as these are not funded by DepEd. Kasi di ba may mga educational research din funding ang DepEd mismo. Then purchase of books subject to DepEd policies and guidelines. So the LGU cannot just any book, but it should be in accordance with the DepEd guidelines and in accordance with the materials that DepEd has allowed to be used by the schools. Yung number 6 po, yan po ay additional item that is already outside the local government code. So that is based naman from another law, which is Republic Act 104110, 10410, which is the Early Years Act, or what we call the Eccd Act, which allowed this law allowed activities to be charged to the SEF of the local government units. So ano po yung mga detalye ng mga pondo na pwedeng pondohan for ECCD activities, yung direct services related to ECCD, organization and support to parent cooperatives and community-based ECCD program, counterpart funds for the programs, facilities for ECCD programs, and operation of the National Child Development Center. As mentioned, recently, there's another joint memorandum circular 2020-1. Ang DILG na lang po ang hindi nakapirma, pero in principle, DILG already agreed and it has been endorsed to the Secretary for signing. That particular JMC 2020-1 included the new provisions under new laws which charge to the SEF again. So, ang National Feeding Program, which is RA 11037, allowed to be charged to the SEF, or the law. That law particularly allowed National Feeding Program activities to be charged to the SEF funds. At isinama na rin po doon yung activities or yung support for dental care and scouting. Ngayon, meron pa pong isang binuo ang DepEd na Joint Memorandum Circular 2020-2, which is actually in support of the Education Continuity Plan. So it is under deliberation, pero I think based on the last meeting, all 3 agencies already agreed in principle to support that particular MC. So it's just a matter of signing lang po among the 3 agencies. Okay, so next naman, so ano pa yung nakapaloob sa SEF guidelines, yung 2017-1? Nakalagay din dito yung planning and budgeting procedures at saka yung monitoring of the SEF. So for the planning and budgeting procedure for SEF, this was lengthily actually discussed by ASEC Toledo. Sinasabi lang dito that the SEF should formulate then the 3-year plan, sabi niya yan, indicating the strategic prioritization of policies in the allocation of the SEF, taking into consideration equitable sharing, no? Dapat merong share ang bawat municipality kung kinakailangan, and the priority needs of the local governments or the schools. And then the LSB should consider the recommendation of the DepEd superintendents and the priorities indicated in the school investment program. There's also the reports also from the LGU, reports from school heads should also be included in the prioritization for the SEF budget, as well as some of the activities in relation to education under the LGU Local Development Investment Program and Annual Investment Plan Program. So the LSB should prepare and approve the annual budget through a local LSB resolution signed by the chair and the co-chair, and by the majority of the members. So pursuant to the local code. So at least 50 plus 1 of the members of the local school board should sign in the budget of the LSB. On monitoring, transparency, and accountability in the allocation and utilization, the SEF, lengthily discussed also by ASEC Toledo, the LSB should furnish the local budget officer, accountant, and treasurer a copy of the SEF budget. The LSB should submit quarterly and annual report to DepEd, copy furnish DILG and DBM. And then the LSB should post their LSB budget and utilization report in their website and or in 3 conspicuous public places in the locality. This is in compliance to the DILG full disclosure policy. So kasama po siya doon sa around 14 to 15 documents that the LGUs are required to post in compliance to the DILG disclosure policy. We have a portal, meron pong portal niya ng DILG. So may online portal po that probably you can visit kung talagang nagsasubmit sila. Okay, next. Next slide. Ito yung hinihingi ni Miss Flora sa akin. Well, kasi wala naman kaming regular parang data on the SEF utilization, but DILG through the support of the Asian Development Bank and through Professor Manasan or Doc Manasan conducted a study somewhere in 2010, 2011 on the utilization of the SEF. So, and I think most of the trends are still similar even up to now. Tumaas lang yung mga budget po siguro. So the findings, there is a wide disparity in SEF resources across local government units in different income classes. So dahil ang SEF budget is based on the collection of local governments based on the real property tax, that is 1% of the real property tax, it really varies across local government units. Kasi kung wala naman silang real property base, wala din silang masisingil. So just as wide disparities in local income, urbanized local government units tend to have larger RPT base as a result of real property values in these local government units compared to less urbanized local government units, especially yung lower income class municipalities. There is a substantial disparities, therefore, in the per pupil SEF spending across different income classes. So kung makikita niyo po yung figures, although this is based on the 2008 figure pa, ang gusto lang namin i-point out dito, that the collection, let's say for example, yung first 2 columns po, no? For first class municipality, the median SEF is 110. Per student po ito, parang ito yung, kung i-divide siya over the total number of students within a locality. For first-class municipalities, 110 po yung allocation pesos per student based on the SEF collection kung i-divide sila over total number of students. Pero pagdating mo na sa 6th-class municipality, 15 pesos na lang ang kaya niyang i-allocate per student. Kasi based yan sa kanyang resources, based on sa kanyang collection, that is the 1% RPT collection. Much more in the cities, ang laki po ng discrepancy. No? Doon sa next 2 slides, next 2 columns naman, for NCR cities, so National Capital Region cities, ang laki po nung kanyang per capita allocation under SEF, hanggang 2,288 pesos per student ang kaya niyang i-allocate per student. Pero pag dating mo na doon sa 5th class city, ang liit na lang. That is only maybe around as divided by 17 of 2,000. That's so 129 pesos lang ang kaya niyang ibigay o i-allocate per student sa isang 5th class city. But even then, that is even higher sa allocation ng isang first class municipality. So ano lang po yung sinasabi natin dito? The SEF funds varied across local government units. So their capability to fund and support education activities also varies depending on the income and the income class of the LG. So that's the income of the local government units. Okay, so these disparities have significant implication in the ability of the LCUs to provide additional support for basic education sector. So next slide. Next slide po. From the same study also, SEF spending priorities. Makita po natin yung distribution of the SEF across budget expense allocation. So halos hindi naman nagkakalayo, but then pinakamalaki ang MOOE at almost 40%. Kasunod ang capital outlay at 32% at then 29% for PS. At saan naman ginagamit ng mga local government units ang mga to? No? This is based on the 2008 study or the 2010 study based on 2008 data. Pero it might have changed kasi meron tayong bagong policy ng 2017. But then I don't think it would have changed so much. So makita natin po dito, across provinces, cities, and municipalities, ang provinces, ang laki po ng allocation nila or they have big chunk of their SEF budget goes to repair construction of school buildings. And the same also is true with the provinces, cities, and municipalities. Yun yung first priority of the SEF spending. Next is personal services for teaching and non-teaching personnel. Mas malaki yung allocation for by municipalities, sinundan ng cities, and then sinundan ng provinces, then cities. And then all the way up, the instructional materials, kasunod ang next priority is division, district, office, MOOE, and vehicle. And then, pero ito po huli nating JMC, wala na po, hindi na po allowed yung vehicle. HR development, school supplies, at then may allocation for them for alternative learning system and non-formal education, SPED, and then science and madrasa. Okay, so next slide po. Well, yun. So yun na yung ano natin. So I'll be talking about the challenges based on the results of the studies. Una, confusing statement as to the allowable expenditure chargeable to SEF expenditure. This is in view of the fact na meron dalawang multiple section in the local government code that for the enumeration of the allowable expenses. So similar sila pero still confusing kasi dalawang enumeration. The provision on the operation and maintenance of school, yun yung consistent binanggit doon sa dalawang section 10 and section 272, is subject for various interpretation. No? Actually, pag nung nagde-deliberate kami sa mga JMC, pwede ba ito? Pero ang tanong, as long as these are under the operation and maintenance of school, these are allowable items. Dapat ganun ng ano. So itong, well, we see it both as a positive and a negative. Medyo iba-iba yung interpretation, especially kung si COA na ang cons, no? Ang COA kasi gusto niya nakikita yung enumeration still under the operation and maintenance of school. But then this ambiguity actually gives the local school boards greater flexibility to respond to the actual needs. Pwede nila itong i-adapt kung ano ba yung present needs. Like for example, ngayon, we have to address learning continuity, respond to COVID. So as long as these are part of the operation of the school, i-declare ng DepEd, I think they should be part of the operation and maintenance of the school. Therefore, allowable expense siya under the SEF. Dapat sana ganon. And then, the SEF with the programs and priorities of the national government. So, nakita natin dun sa, dun sa yung in the spending priority ang sports and sports development. So ito ba ang priority ng national government? So kailangan, I think, the information on the allocation of the national budget have to be communicated to local government units to ensure that SEF is used to advance the programs to basic education. So dapat alam ni local governments ano yung priority ni national so that they can attune their SEF funding or to the priorities of the national government. So critical po yung information sharing between DepEd and the boards. For better coordination between provincial school boards and the municipal school boards. Kung makikita po natin, they are all allowed to finance the same items. So baka kailangan na delineation na ang provincial, lahat namang coverage ni probinsya ay hindi, lahat namang munisipyo ay coverage din ni probinsya. So dapat hindi sila nag-duplicate delineation. At the provincial level, dapat ganito po yung strategic funding allocation nyo, then sa municipality and specific allocation authorization nila. And then, siguro din dapat tingnan yung relationship with the school governance council, merong school governance council, so that they can share priority areas for education. And then duplication of expenditure priorities. So yun yung sinabi natin. Provinces, cities, and municipalities are funding the same items. And even probably maybe DepEd, no? May mga items na already in the budget of DepEd and then allowable pa rin siya under SEF. At nakita natin doon sa spending priorities, province, cities, and municipalities are funding the same items. Hindi na. So, baka dapat i-clarify ano dapat ang pinupondohan at the provincial level, infrastructure ba siya, school building ba siya, and then sa municipal level, would it be the specific school activities or specific school PPAs. And then inequity of SEF resources. Siyempre, dahil nga sinabi natin that SEF is based on the RPT collection, so it really varies across local government units. So there's an inequity. So hindi universal yung ating support to basic education or support ng local government units sa basic education. So dahil dyan, meron kaming konting recommendation to address some of these items. Well, una, propose amendments to the SEF provision under the local government code. So may mga ongoing discussion ito led by Senator Wing Gatchalian on amending some of the provision in relation to SEF. Ang aming recommendation lang is probably think of a way under the law to increase equity in education spending by providing more to local government units with low real property tax base. So we don't know how this can be done. Probably yung, let's say, for example, those LGUs with higher SEF base or real property tax collection can share some to, like the likes of Makati, baka pwede siyang mag-share in some. So there probably be a mechanism that can be put in the law. And then to clarify the allowable expenditure, it's either may negative list or may positive list, depende kung ano ang. Basta clear lang yung expenditure items that is allowed under the law. And then second, improve the administrative guidelines on the preparation of the LSB budget and utilization of the SEF. So ito po yung mga JMC natin. So ngayon, yun naman, the JMC evolves, no? So ngayon ang nangyayari, addendum to the previous JMC. Hindi tulad po ng previous years prior to 2017 JMC na nire-repeal, pinapalitan ko ano yung previous. Ngayon, para mas madali, from 2017 to 2020, addendum na lang ang nangyayari. So tinadagdagan lang kung ano yung mga pwedeng i-allow under SEF budget or SEF expenditure. Depende on the current situation. Tulad nga po ngayon, kailangan ng pondo, support funds for the learning continuity plan and in response to COVID-19. So, nilagay din po namin to establish a need-based criteria for allocating SEF across schools to ensure the efficient and effective use or allocation of the SEF budget. Kasi po, may mga, for example, for a certain year, may school na nakakatanggap. Siyempre, kailangan i-prioritize ng LSB, ng board. So, may schools na nakakatanggap, may schools na wala. In the next year, yung schools naman. So, I think there should be really a clear criteria for the efficient distribution of the SEF budget. Then, avoid expenditure overlaps by clarifying well who should spend for what. Yun nga po sabi natin, pwede ba i-clarify ito talaga DepEd, ito pang province, ito pang city and municipality. So walang overlap at wala pong naghihintayan o baka pinondohan na niya. Baka naman so gano'n. Then institutionalize greater transparency between the DepEd and the LGUs in terms of reporting of resources that the school received from DepEd budget, and on the other hand, on the actual SEF collections and its utilization during the budget year, in order to foster better working relationship in the LSB. So kailangan talaga information sharing, DepEd, to the LGUs and even provinces, cities, and municipalities across their levels. And then I think last, improve revenue collection for SEF. As we mentioned, the SEF grows when the RPT collection improves. So our local government units able to maximize the collection. So they have to improve their collection efficiency. Based on the data we have, medyo malayo na po itong data. Maybe Director Pam can update this data. Sinasabi lang po dito, ang collection efficiency of local government units are around 70 to 80% o 83% lang. So hindi nila na fully maximize, hindi nila fully yung SEF collection, yung RPT collection. As well as malaking factor yung updating nila ng kanilang rates, yung tax rates nila, yung schedule of market values. Kasi if the LGUs do not update their schedule of market values, mababa yung magiging tax collection nila on the real property tax. Dito po sa data, sinasabi age of the real property values, although 2012 pa po ito, I think Director will give more current data. Ang sinasabi lang po dito is that most of the schedule of market values of the local government units, provinces, and the cities in Metro Manila are more than 10 years. Madami po sa kanila, more than 10 years, almost 40% of them. Yung 6 to 10 years, 31, although hindi na nga po ito. And then, ang sinasabi sa local government ko, tama ba ako pa? Every 5 years, they have to update their schedule of market values. Para pong prices yan eh. Kailangan i-update natin yung schedule of market values para na-update natin yung, anong tawag dyan? Yun nga, ang value ng real property sa mga localities. Kasi kung 10 years back, magkano pa ba yung property ng 1 hectare of land noon? Okay, so, and then the last, institutionalize an SEF monitoring scheme. Although may mga reports naman, siguro we need to have some kind of an online reporting so that all of us can see in one portal, the ILG, the OFBLGF, DBM, and even our partners to see how SEF is being prioritized, and SEF collection plus the utilization of the local school boards. So I think that's the last of my presentation. Marami pong salamat at magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat.
Salamat po, Director Bonagua. Very informative po ng presentation nyo. And it's really show na kailangan magtulong-tulong tayo how to address these disparities. Kasi yun ang issue nga natin, no? The disparities of the utilization of the SEF. If there is a model that is done by the LGU of Makati, why not make it a model? So, yung tapos, tinake note din namin yung mga recommendation nyo. So, from the challenges, napaka evidence-based ng mga data presented and also the recommendations. Actually, it can answer, I would say there are feedbacks in the chat box about the utilization of SEF by LGUs. Maganda yung suggestion yun at to really revisit the guidelines on how to make it need-based. Kasi ang mga sinasabi sa chat box, taga-pirma na lang sila, tapos bumababa na lang yung mga plano and everything about that. That is a very good recommendation. You've answered the feedback of some participants in the chat box. So thank you again, Director Bonagua. So we have heard about the policies, recommendation, about itong mga policies na to and recommendation. How do we would finance this, no? Itong sa financial aspect naman. So now we will listen to the Department of Finance. Okay, so thank you again. So let me introduce first Ma'am Pamela. So our next speaker is Director Pamela Quezon of the Bureau of Local Government Finance, BLGF, from the Department of Finance. Kanina ko lang naintindihan kay Ma'am Pamela, no? All the issues about finances for the local government, for the LGUs, ay nasa DOF directly, no? She will explain further. So for that, yan yung mga tanong namin. So let me first introduce her. She is the Director for Local Fiscal Policy Service of the Bureau of Local Government Finance, an attached agency in the Department of Finance, DOF. She started her career in the government at the National Tax Research Center of DOF in 1996. She is a computer engineering graduate with master's degree in management, major in public administration, and doctorate and PhD degree in the management of major in public administration and doctorate in development administration. Some of her recent engagement includes the development, design, and enhancement of the online reporting system of the DOF on the local government fiscal and financial matters. The electronic statement of receipts and expenditures, or they call it ESRE, or electronic SRE system, which is an important core data capturing system of LGU fiscal information. So, naka-computerize ang ating mga expenditures. In fact, this system was recently enhanced, and other important modules such as the Environment and Natural Resources Data Management Tool for the PHEIEI and the PPEI, naku, hindi ko natanong po sa inyo to, sorry. Kayo na lang po elaborate, is now linked to the system. She was also instrumental in reviewing and providing technical inputs in the development of various manuals issued by the Bureau, such as ERST Manual, Resource Mobilization Manual, LGU Guide to Computerization, Mass Appraisal Guidebook, among other publications. So, for us to talk about the tracking, monitoring of utilization of special education fund in the local government unit, let's welcome Director Pamela Quezon. You have the floor now, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Miss May. Can I be heard? I'm loud and clear?
Loud and clear. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We would like to thank, of course, the Open Government Partnership CSO Education Cluster for inviting us. We're very flattered to be invited. Why? Because we are among the, nandito kami kasama yung mga experts who did the policies on special education fund. Kaya po, we will just be supplementing what they have presented. And it's very good, Ma'am May, that I'm the last speaker. What's the advantage of being the last speaker? I can skip some of the slides, concentrate on what we can contribute to the discussion. So the right of every Filipino to a free, quality basic education, again, as discussed earlier by the Ma'am Flora, is guaranteed in our Constitution. So through the years, our government has continuously exerted efforts to close the gap in providing key education inputs to improve education outcomes. Just like Director Anna, we always go back to the PIDS study of Chat Manasan. And in the 2011 PIDS study of Ma'am Chat, it says that basic education is still largely the responsibility of the central government. So my name is Pam, for those first time that have heard that there's such a bureau under the Department of Finance. We are the Bureau of Local Government Finance under the Department of Finance. Our presentation flow would be this. We have 6 parts. So the outline of the presentation will be about BLGF, who are we, what's our responsibilities, the legal framework for the taxing powers of LGUs, the legal basis and utilization of SEF. Again, I told you earlier, that's a good thing to be the last speaker because they have tackled it. Most of them, the experts already explained it. We'll go into the expenditure items under SEF, but again, I'll skip some of the slides because this was, again, expertly discussed by our previous speakers. What we're going to contribute in this discussion are on resource mobilization. What are our proposal, and more to discuss about real property tax. Earlier on, you have been hearing this SEF is a piggyback of the real property tax. Remember those words kasi mamaya po i-discuss natin yan. So, who are we? What is the responsibility of the Bureau of Local Government Finance? The DOFs, we are the DOF's arm, directly responsible over the fiscal and financial affairs of local government unit. So under a decentralized environment, we are aiming and we are providing a catalytic role in the effective and sustainable management of fiscal and financial resources of LGUs because of our end goal to transform them into self-reliant communities. So BLGF is very vigilant and dedicated in the pursuit of development and professionalization of our employees, including treasury and assessment services in the LGUs. Why do we have to emphasize treasury and assessment services? Please, I hope, I don't know if everyone knew this, the only local official at the local government unit that is not being appointed by the local chief executive are the treasurers. So kung may tresurero po sa bawat probinsya, city at municipality, ang may power po mag-hire at fire will be the Department of Finance. So ito po kami, ito po ang BLGF at ang aming mandato. Balikan po natin yung framework. In some of the discussion of the previous speakers, this was also touched, but let me at least explain it to you that under the Constitution, the LGUs has a power. They were given the power to create their own resources. Bakit po tayo doon tumutumbok? Kasi nandun po yung real property tax, nandun din po yung special education fund. Nandun sa Constitution, nagkaroon po tayo ng batas, that is the Local Government Code. Doon po sinasabi na the LGUs, each local government LGUs shall exercise its power to create its own sources of revenues. Pero hindi po ibig sabihin na nandun na siya sa local government code, pwede na silang mangolekta. Ang ibig po sabihin nun, gawa pa po sila muna ng ordinansa. So, local ordinance is the last step. They should be able to develop this ordinance bago po sila makakolekt. So, nandun po sa local ordinance, yung real property tax, magkanong porsyento na babayaran natin, nandun din po yung special education fund. So, Section 233, ano po yung rates of levy? So, notwithstanding the devolution of many basic services to LGUs, we all know that basic and secondary education is still the responsibility of the national government through the Department of Education. However, under the next slide where you can see the rate of levy, LGUs are allowed to supplement funding support to education because the SEF, again, I will use the word Director Anna has used, is a piggyback imposition of the real property tax. So the LGC authorizes all province and cities, probinsya po, 81, cities 146, and the lone municipality within Metro Manila. Sino po yon? Pateros po yon. Shall fix a uniform rate of basic real property tax applicable to the respective localities. So they have to ito po yung rate of levies nila. The rate in the case of provinces shall not exceed 1% of the assessed value. Mamaya po, alam ko may mga katanungan dyan, 1% of the assessed value. Hindi po 1% of the real property tax due. Mamaya po, explain natin dyan. While in the case of a city or a municipality within Metro Manila, the rate shall not exceed 2% of the assessed value of the real property. Tingnan nyo pa lang po sa rate of levy. Lamang na po ang city at yung munisipyo sa Metro Manila against the provinces. Aside from the imposition of basic tax on real property, there is an additional annual tax of not exceeding 1% that can be levied by the LGUs, and this proceeds shall exclusively accrue to the Special Education Fund. I was listening to our Undersecretary from Department of Education earlier. Then he gave a quick history. I'll also give you a piece of SEF history. So the Special Education Fund was originally created under Republic Act 5447. Ano po yung title ng 5447? An act creating Special Education Fund to be constituted from the proceeds of an additional real property tax and a certain portion of the taxes on Virginia-type cigarettes and duties on imported leaf, tobacco, defining the activities to be financed, creating the school boards for the purpose, and appropriating funds therefrom, which took effect when? Way back in 1969. So in the case of provinces, 1969 po ito, 5447, hindi po ito batas ngayon. 50% of that collections from the additional 1% real property tax imposed went to the SEF of the municipality where the property subject, so anong property, doon po mapupunta, 20% to the SEF of the province and 30% to the Bureau of Treasury. So at that time in 1969, kasama pa po si national government na nakakakuha sa Special Education Fund. So the legal basis, again, this was discussed earlier, may special funds pong tinatawag sa local government units. It's maintained in every provincial, city, and municipal treasury office. So Special Education Fund is one of the special funds being maintained. Ano-ano po ba yung funds na yon? May general fund, dun po papasok lahat ng collection ng local government units, dun din po papasok ang internal revenue allotment ng LGUs. May special education fund, dyan po papasok sa special fund na yan, yung piggyback po sa real property tax. May pangatlong fund na pong special fund, ito po yung special health fund na sinisimulan pong iset up sa mga LGUs. Mayroon po din tayong trust fund. So ito po yung different funds na mayroon sa local government units natin. So functions of the local school boards, I think this will be one of my slides that I have to skip because this was already discussed by the experts, previous speakers. So also off the next slide. We have the proceeds. So the proceeds from the additional 1% SEF tax shall be automatically released. Automatic po yan to the local school boards. But in the case of provinces, the proceeds shall be divided equally between the provincial and municipal school boards. So the law specifically identifies to where the proceeds shall be allocated for. And again, this was discussed earlier, but let me repeat and reiterate, the proceeds shall be allocated for operation and maintenance of public schools, construction and repair of school buildings, facilities and equipment, education, research, purchase of books and periodicals, sports development, as determined and approved by the local school board. So the next slide also speaks about the 2017 joint circular. So this is the joint circular of DepEd, DBM, DILG. So kaya nga po very flattered kami na makasama here, although we're not part of the JMC, but we hope that we can contribute to the discussion of SEF. So yun po yung susunod na slide natin. Yung susunod po na slide, dito na po natin tignan. magkano po ba talaga ang nakokolekta ng SEF? At ikukwento namin paano po ba namin nakukuha ang information nito. So in the next slide, you will see a graph and a table. Yan. Sabi ko po kanina, treasurers are the only local official at the local government unit being appointed by the Department of Finance. Ano pong nakaakibat na responsibilidad ng mga treasurers? They have to give us accountability reports. At part ng accountability reports nila is a quarterly report on all the receipts and expenditures of the local government units. So we have gone online way back in 2009. So every quarter, they have to report it. And we are very proud to tell you, when it comes to timeliness, almost perfect na kami. Why? Because we are already receiving 100% of the reports of the provinces, cities, municipalities in the country every quarter. Bakit lang po kami nakakamiss? Kasi may mga LGUs po na tatamaan ng bagyo during submission time na malilate lang po ng 1 o 2 araw ang kanilang report. But every quarter, we have 100% submission rate. Ano pong inaalagaan namin ngayon? Okay na kami sa timeliness. Now, we are trying to improve on the accuracy of the data. Kasi nandiyan po yung integrity ng paglabas namin ng mga numero. As you can see on your screen, I think this was also mentioned by our undersecretary earlier, comparing the collections, the receipts from the SEF and from the expenditures. At meron po talagang gap na nakikita. And this gap can be used by our department to triangulate the data. Sabi ko nga po sa inyo kanina, we want to improve on the accuracy of the report. But looking at this graph on the aggregate, you are seeing that SEF has been growing every year. So on the aggregate, SEF in 2019 increased by 13%, or a nominal amount of 36.72 billion from 32.53 billion in 2018. This total SEF collection in 2019 comprises about 66% share from the city, so malaki po talaga yung nakukuha sa city, 17% share from the provincial LGUs, and 18% from the municipalities. So ano po ang caveat namin here? We want our data, BLGF's data, ESRA data, treasurer's data, to further analyze these figures and report para po mabigyan namin ng public ng more information and accurate information, not just on the special education fund, but in all other expenditure items. Saan ba ginastos ng LGUs ang receipts at ang tax collection natin? Not in the slide included is the utilization rate of the SEF. Okay, ito po yung na-receive. Ano po? Ano pong utilization rate nila? In 2019, we have a utilization rate of 70%. For the past 2 years before that, 2017 and 2018, we have 61% utilization rate. So again, for the next 3 slides, I also have to skip because this was explicitly discussed by the speakers, previous speakers. These are the joint circular that we have. Let's go to the utilization. So, nagkaroon ng receipt, saan po ginastos? So, 61% of the SEF was actually spent on general administration. 17% was spent for elementary school operations, while only 6% was utilized for secondary schools. How we wish we could also give you the PSMO capital outlay, but apologies, we were not able to produce that. But this figure show you the contribution where the SEF were utilized. And the next slide just gives you a picture kung gaano kalaki yung expenditure nila sa general administration, which is, again, 61% of the total receipts received on SEF. The next slide talks about COA common findings and pertaining to SEF education. And let me just read. So these are the non-priority expenditures were charged because they're not following the circular issued by our colleagues from DepEd, DBM, and DILG. Expenditures were not in accordance with the intended purpose of the SEF. The SEF was invested in high-yield account or time deposit. Di nila ginastos, nilagay nila sa bangko. The utilization of SEF budgets is not in accordance with circulars and guidelines prescribed for common government transaction. The next slide, way back in 2013, maikwento po lang namin, we analyzed SEF collection. This was published in newspaper of general circulation, if I'm not mistaken, it's Inquirer. We analyzed the SEF collection performance vis-a-vis the profile of public school students based on DepEd records. And we discovered that 7 in every 10 provinces collect low local revenues to spend for education services. This means 52 out of the 81 provinces were generating SEF below par. We did an averaging of all collections, SEF collection, on a per capita. And I think you have heard also Director Anna mention a per capita basis data and establish that the average is only about 330 per student is available from SEF. At that time, we noted Batangas has the highest SEF at 640 million. Bataan, on the other hand, with the highest per capita of about 3,153 pesos per student. So iba-iba po. Tama po si Director Ana, depende po yan sa collection ng LGU. But you will also note that in Basilan, it has the lowest SEF collection. How much? Only 130,000 pesos. And if you have a ratio on per capita per student, what does it mean? It's only 3 pesos per student. So for cities, we established that the average SEF expenditure, also in 2013, we're going to update these numbers, is around 1,000 pesos. So out of the cities that we have at the time, which is 143, 88 of them were collecting below par. The highest SEF, kanina nyo pa naririnig ang Makati, you're correct, Makati at 1.47 billion with magkano ang ratio nila? 16,404 pesos per student ratio. Again, on the city, sino po naman ang lowest? The lowest SEF, on the other hand, was recorded and registered in Lamitan with only 680,000 pesos collection. So magkano po yun? Pag per capita mo per student, that means it's only 35 pesos per student. So these are the statistics that we have that we are analyzing at the Bureau of Local Government Finance. So let me go to ano po ba ang dapat na reforms na dapat natin ma-improve. We are advocating that the real property valuation and assessment reform be passed in this Congress to help improve SEF. Bakit po? Kasi nakita na namin, real property tax, alam niyo po ba ito yung mga ari-ari ang hindi natitinag? Ibig po sabihin, captured po dapat ng LGU ang collection na to, pero hindi po yan totoo, hindi po yan nakaka-capture. Kasama po yan sa what is wrong with the current system na nandun po sa susunod na slide. Ano po ang wrong with the current system? We have multiple overlapping valuation. Iba-iba po ang nagbibigay ng valuation sa ating country. We have outdated valuations, I guess. This was also mentioned earlier by Director Ana. In fact, only 37% of the LGUs have updated values. We also have outdated valuation which results in loss and forgone revenues, no single agency responsible, and we also don't have any comprehensive real property electronic database in the country. The next slide will take you to the picture and map of the Philippines. The red spots will tell you ito yung mga lugar na outdated ang values. So, so let's visualize the degree of undervaluation in the case of LGU. So the color shows the number of years that they did not conduct general revision. By the way, it's every 3 years po na dapat mag-revise ang isang LGU. So 5 out of the 10 richest provinces in terms of locally sourced revenues are using outdated SMV. Hindi po sila gumagamit. Mamaya po, baka pwede nating sabihin, kung may magtatanong po, most of these LGUs have outdated SMVs and mostly at northern part of Luzon. How about cities? Cities, on the other hand, 7 out of the 10 richest cities in terms of locally sourced revenues are using outdated SMVs. Mostly where? Mostly here at the National Capital Region, here at the NCR. So what are we telling you? We're telling you that provinces, on the next slide, if you're not updating your schedule of market values, provinces will forgo around 7.4 billion in real property taxes, and cities, on the other hand, will be missing around 23.077 billion in real property taxes. So, what are the effects? Pag hindi ka nag-revise, mamaya po sasabihin nyo, magre-revise, taas na naman ang tax niyan. We'll explain that. But let me tell you first the effects of outdated values. So we have 5 here. One, which is very obvious, unrealized revenues, socioeconomic benefits because of poor collection. With poor collection, there will be delay in implementation of infrastructure project also. Why? Because we have right-of-way issues. We also have conflicting land values resulting in this. And we have lengthy court litigation. Tama po yung naririnig natin. Kapag usapin at kaso sa lupa, nagkaapo ka na, hindi pa po tapos ang kaso mo. Projects are delayed and there will be cost overrun. So what are the reforms that we are proposing? We're proposing these 6 reforms on your slide right now. Adopt internationally standards, rationalize the process. Dapat po, wala nang BIR values, wala nang zonal values, wala nang LGU values kasi nako-confuse ang mga taxpayers pagdating sa taxes pa lang po, pagdating sa real properties natin. Establish single valuation base for taxation. Insulate valuation from politicization. LG shall continue to regulate tax rates and assessment levels. I have a slide on that on the next one. Support LGs in fulfilling their function and establish a comprehensive database. Sabi ko po kanina sa inyo, tandaan niyo yung assessment level. Bakit po dyan naka-base yung Special Education Fund? Ito rin po, in a nutshell, paano po kinukompute ang real property tax ninyo. Ano po ang composition ng real property tax? Ito po yung nandito sa political function. Mayroon po tayong tinatawag na assessment level. Depende po sa property type ninyo. Meron po tayong tinatawag na tax rate. Ito po yung sinabi ko sa inyo, no, 1% for provinces, maximum 2% for cities. Ito po yung dalawang factors na kailangan. I-multiply nyo po siya sa market value. Ina-advocate namin updating of schedule of market value. Hindi po ba tataas ang taxes na aming babayaran? Yan po ang misconception ng most of our taxpayers. Hindi po totoo yon. It's not, common misconception is that the increase in real property tax is strictly value-driven. Hindi po. Bakit po hindi value-driven? Kasi may assessment level and tax rate po tayo. The increase in the SMV, sabi nila, will automatically lead in proportionate increase in RPT. Hindi din po. Bakit po? Kasi pwedeng babaan ng assessment level, pwede pong babaan ng tax rate. Ang perfect example po namin dito na laging sinasabi bakit may disparity, alam po ninyo ang Ayala in Makati. In Ayala, in Makati, ang schedule of market value po nila ngayon is 40,000 per square meter. pero hindi na po yan ang market value sa Ayala. Ang market value na po sa Ayala is around 700,000 per square meter. Sabi pa nga po, pag pinipresent namin yan, hindi na yan totoo, Miss Pam. 1 million na po dyan per square meter. So ano po, yung difference sa market value, hindi po natin yan nakakapture. So paano po ulit ang pag-compute ng real property tax nyo? Schedule of market value, kunin nyo po yan sa assessor's office or treasurer's office. Ang magkano market value dun sa property nyo, i-multiply nyo po sa type ng property nyo. Kung yan ay residential, tignan nyo po ang ordinansa ng LGU. Kung 20% yan, times yun ng 20% and i-multiply nyo po ng tax rate. Kung magkano po ang babayaran mo sa real property tax, kung ang babayaran mo po is 10,000 pesos, nag-a-add po ng additional 1% doon. Ibig sabihin, kung ikaw po ay nasa probinsya at 1% po ang ini-impose ng provincial rate, may additional po na 1% doon po sa assessed value. Hindi po doon sa real property tax na binayaran mo ng 10,000. So ito po yung paano kinukompute ang ating real property tax. So the benefit of the reforms will be on the next slide. We are hoping this reform agenda that we have could now be able to have a single valuation base kasi gusto na rin po namin tanggalin yung BIR zonal value. Ano po bang kinalaman ng zonal value? Ito po yung pag nagta-transfer ka ng properties, diyan po minsan pinipeg yung tax na babayaran mo on capital gains tax, estate tax, and donors tax. Gusto namin yung schedule of market values na lang po na gagawin ng LGUs. So, single valuation base, uniform standard. Alam nyo po, license po lahat ng assessor natin sa buong Pilipinas sa LGU. Kaya dapat po isang standard na lang po ang ginagamit nila, comprehensive database, which would eventually increase in revenues, improve our local autonomy, will have higher investor confidence kasi alam ng investor magkano ang tax na babayaran niya sa LGU. And number 7 is ito po yung tinutumbok namin sa discussion na to, will have guaranteed benefit of education sector and reduce government costs. Ito po yung susunod na slide, wherein we want an increase in a special education fund by making sure that the base is regularly updated and we have collection efficiency. Magkano pong collection efficiency natin? Tinanong po yan na Director Ana kanina, 71% lang po sa buong Pilipinas, 70% sa city, 68% sa munisipyo at probinsya. Ano pong ibig sabihin? May marami pong hindi nagbabayad, marami pong uncollectables. Hanggat hindi po yan nababayaran, kasama po dyan, natatamaan din po ang SEF. So, on the next slide, we are just showing you the different bills filed in the 18th Congress. We are supportive of these bills. Salient focus of the bills is expanding the purpose, inclusion of private schools, also of the Indigenous People Support Program. Meron lang po kami inaaral sa ibang bills na gusto po kasing gawing collateral ang SEF. Siguro po yun, isa sa mga areas na dapat po naming pag-aralan also at the Department of Finance. So, proposed eligible activities of the SEF. Again, this is a slide that I have to skip, but because this has been also mentioned by the speakers. So, just takeaway messages from the Bureau of Local Government Finance. That will be our last slide. Supplementary funding support to public basic education are provided by LGUs through a sustainable source. Ano tong sustainable source na to, which is the Special Education Fund. LGUs should maximize the utilization and disbursement of SEF for education-related expenses, especially in preparation for the learning continuity plan for the new normal. We are also supporting our experts, policymakers in expanding the use and purpose of the SEF, which is very necessary, especially now that we have the current pandemic, and we're pushing for the reform. We're pushing for the LGUs maximizing the revenue powers. because at the end of the day, every time that we have improved collection, SEF also will benefit and our students will benefit. Thank you so much again for the opportunity, and thank you from the Bureau of Local Government Finance. Back to you, Ms. May.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ma'am Pem. Napaka-comprehensive at detailed yung presentation. And actually, we are also making a study about SEF as a domestic resource mobilization for education. So your presentation and the rest of the presentation of our speakers are really very, very helpful. And we thank you for that. For now, after hearing our four main speakers, I hope you can still bear with us because the next portion of this webinar is about to listen to our panel of reactors. Okay, so that from the presentation you have made. But before that, Flora asked me to have some energizer. I don't know what to do. But anyway, just for an energizer, we've been sitting for more than 2 hours. Let's just put our hands up just for the relaxation and everything. Yeah. And then, yes. And then I've been teaching this to others. I don't know, baka sawa na yung iba. Pero for the new ones, let's do this tapping of the hands because this involves also the regulation and energizing our internal organs because we're in sitting. So after this one, you see this one and this one, you just put it here. Okay. Yes, that's right. And the last one would be this one. Hold the thumbs. We have so we can get it. Okay. So thank you for bearing with me. I hope this energized some of our internal organs. Anyway, so we go now to the panel of reactors. As I've been telling, there will be two reactors that we invited, and also we will call one representative from the participants later. So for now, we will have, we know her as Jessica, as Jack, but she is, her full name is Jessica Reyes Cantos. So Jack to us, Jack is a co-convener of Social Watch Philippines, our partner in alternative budget initiative in all sectors, education, health, and so others. And also Jack, not Jet, sorry, Jack Santos. Yeah, so okay. So Jessica or Jack, we call it. Medyo magkatunog eh. So Jack is also the president of Action for Economic Reforms. They had a lot of study about this economy and budgets and everything. So Jack, good afternoon. You have the floor now, Jack.
Yeah, thank you, May. I will ask to also share my screen if I may be allowed to do so. But while my presentation, my quick comments is loading, I'd like to thank the ENET for organizing this very important discussion, and for ang lakas niyo po ha sa mga ahensya. I mean, to get DBM, DepEd, DOF, DLGF, and the ILG in one room, and they have so much to share and so much information for us to absorb ay napakasaya.
Kaya hindi kami masyadong pinagpaparticipate. Dapat kami.
I think, may I request others to have their mics muted?
Hello?
Po?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Mute lang po yung iba. Thank you.
Yeah. So, ang gaganda po ng mga realizations, challenges, and recommendations coming from our national government agencies. And I couldn't help but just agree in the major parts, but at the same time, shocked by knowing that, yes, there is a lot of potential to collect SEF, but at the same time, there is underutilization in certain areas, and there are some misutilization. Nilalagay sa high yielding, nilalagay sa, rather than spend it on much needed materials for the school, ilalagay sa treasury bills and whatever. Hindi ginagamit sa tamang paraan. So I would like to just quickly go through some of the things that have been running through my mind as we discuss. So ito po, and just quickly about social watch. Let me see. Kita niyo po yung yung slide yan. Baka po kasi hindi alam ng iba kung ano yung social watch. Well, social watch is very active on budget advocacy, both in the national and in the local budget advocacy. Meron po kaming alternative budget initiative na kasama ang INET at other CSOs and networks. We use the Sustainable Development Goals as a lens in analyzing, and also the equity lens in analyzing the budgets of various national government agencies. Ang INET po ang nag-head ng education cluster ng alternative budget initiative ng Social Watch. So we do budget engagements with the NGAs and Congress, both the Senate and the House. We submit plans, projects, and activities for inclusion in agency programs. We undertake studies on program and costings, and we track budget spending as much as we can. And then the other thing that Social Watch does is we have this so-called People's Public Finance Institute. We want to localize the practice that we've been doing in the Alternative Budget Initiative. Pero LGUs po ang ina-analyze. So we conduct trainings, we build capacities of local NGOs and POs to engage local public finance processes. We strive to build partnerships between LGUs and the sectors that they serve, and we tap the academy. Meron po kaming several universities and colleges in the regions that what we call PPFI hubs na ready to assist yung mga local governments and CSOs and POs in analyzing the local budgets. Gusto ko pong pakita lang yung equity lens na binabanggit namin. Kasi kanina repeat po mga DILG, DOF, and even si Flora kanina sa kanyang welcome opening remarks ay ini-emphasize niya kagad nga rin yung equity. And ayun, ang hirap kasi nung pare-pareho kayong bibigay ng equally ng mga boxes na makikita nyo na iba-iba naman ang kondisyon ng mga bata. So, iba-iba ang kondisyon ng mga munisipyo. So, equality doesn't mean justice. Hindi pwedeng pantay, patas lahat ay ibigay mo kasi iba-ibang sitwasyon ng mga lokalidad. Ngayon, I have just 5 points to share. Point number 1, there are competing claims to local government resources. Alam po natin yan. Talagang parang hindi matapos yung napakarami yung mga listahan. Pag titingnan niyo po yung local government code, may mga mandatory appropriations provision. Ayan po, DRRM fund, dapat 5% of income. Yung sweldo ng mga taga-munisipyo, dapat pagka ikaw ay first to third class, 45% of the annual income. Pagka ikaw ay 4 to 6 class municipality, 55%. So, immediately kita nyo po kalahati ng pondo ng local government ay napupunta lang sa sweldo, more than half. Pagka ikaw ay 4 to 6 class municipality. So, the remaining 50% or thereabouts ay hati-hati pa sa iba-iba. So, ayan po yung GAD budget, yung DRRM, may children na 1% of IRA, may development fund na 20% of IRA, SK, 10% of the barangay appropriations, meron pa pong 1% of yung child protection. So, ang dami pong competing claims for LGUs. And within the SEF itself, there are competing claims. Makita niyo po, pahaba ng pahaba ang listahan ng mga kailangang pondohan for the Special Education Fund. Ang tanong, ay dahil pahaba ng pahaba ang listahan, lumalaki po ba naman yung pondo for the SEF? So, yun, ang point number 2 po, which brings me to point number 2. The problem is not just a question of getting a bigger share to fund education expenditures, but enlarging the pie. Kailangan pong mas lumaki. Kasi kahit na anong tingnan mo, pagka lumaki yung share ng education, kukunti, merong ibang makukuhanan na sektor. So, ang mas mahalaga, palakihin nyo yung pizza pie natin para mas kahit na hindi nyo na-maintain, kahit na-maintain pa rin yung percentage share, dahil mas lumaki yung pie, mas malaki yung pupunta for education. So how do we enlarge the pie? Ito, inano ko po sa magandang chart ito na hindi pinakita kanina ni Director Pam pero pinakita niya ito one time sa amin nung nagkukwentuhan kami about SEF with UNICEF. Makita niyo po yung real property tax to GDP ratio na collection pamula ito pong year 2004 onwards halos pababa, tapos may little uptick lang towards 2016, 2017. Pero generally, as a share of GDP, hindi pa po ulit bumabalik ang share ng real property tax to GDP in the highest peak that we have had in way back in around 2001, 2002. So that's bakit kaya ganun? Lumalaki in absolute terms kasi po lumalaki ang GDP natin, pero as a share, it has been declining. Ito po yung nakuha na galing po sa credits to the DOF BLGF slide that I picked up quite a while. Ito rin po, tingnan ninyo yung real property to GDP of other Asian countries. Galing din po ito sa BLGF. Kita nyo po na, as of hanggang 2014 lang yung data nila. Pero mas mababa pa rin ang Pilipinas na real property collection as a percent of GDP compared to other countries. Pero marami pong potential na pwedeng pagkuhanan ng pondo. This is under the Department of Finance rin. There are so many funding sources na pwede pong makuhanan ng local governments. This is from the Municipal Development Fund Office. So this is not education related, but still, if they are able to source money for their other needs, then mapi-free up yung funds for education. So, ayan, may for water, meron for technical assistance and contingency fund, etc. So, I encourage people to, especially people from the local governments, to look at the MDFO website, yung Municipal Development Fund Office. There are potentials for other funding sources. For all you know, there might be some funding for education as well if they would be updating their menu of programs. My third point, it is difficult to pin our hopes on the Mandanas decision. Ito, parang akala ng mga local governments ay, yehey, panalo tayo sa Mandanas decision. We will be getting our just share in the IRA. Kasi po yung IRA ay dati internal taxes lang yung interpretation. Ngayon, ang interpretation ay yung total tax collection ng gobyerno, which includes customs duties collections, mga pag tayo ay nagta-travel, mga additional taxes. So, mas malaki po, actually, totoo na by 2022, tataas by almost 30% ang share ng mga local governments, which means mas maraming flexibilities ang LGUs. But again, I was thankful na napakinggan ko si Director Pam doon sa isang webinar ng DILG. Sabi niya, "Huy, we're just talking of 2022, which the basis of that is the 2019 tax collection." Tama nga ba, Director Pam? Anyway,
Yes.
3 years back, so 2022 minus 3.
Yes,
So,
yes,
yeah.
ma'am. Yes.
Yeah. So 2019 maganda pa ekonomiya natin noon. So talagang pero pag 2020 na yung base of the era, bagsak ang ekonomiya natin. So we have to let's not just think about getting a bigger share, but again enlarging the pie. Again, pero gusto kong tanungin po sa ngayon rin ang ating mga national government agencies. This is a question, and even for DepEd nga, how much of this national government agency services will be further devolved to LGUs by virtue of the Mandanas decision. For DepEd, which is national talaga at hindi naman technically devolved ang education, but is DepEd also thinking of devolving some of the things that they are funding in the regular, what is DBM's opinion on this? I suppose there's a review that's ongoing, but we'd like to know in anticipation of supposedly an assumption that there'll be more funds going to LGUs. My point number 4, it is best to have a hard look at the real property valuation which funds the SEF. Ito po ay pinukpok kanina ng ating mga speakers na galing sa real property tax ang pondo for SEF. So we support the real property valuation reform proposal of the Department of Finance. Kailangan na po ito. But sana po ay masuportahan kaagad rin natin to kasi it's an important reform measure and it taxes those who own property. Yung mga may ari-arian. And it's an equity measure if you look at it. My last point is CSOs must have an active role in their local school boards and demand transparency. Kanina po dun sa chat board natin, talagang nanggigigil yung mga PTA National Federation presidents natin na kami taga-pirma lang kami, papatawag lang kami, ready-made na yung they don't have any role in the crafting of the how the SEF will be utilized. We are thankful that the DILG has been supportive of having participatory mechanisms. Pag tinignan niyo po ang DILG website, meron doong sa bandang baba on resources, meron doong Petra serye. Tingnan niyo po yan kasi Social Watch has done what we call 5 videos on ang Petra po stands for People Empowerment for Transparency and Accountability. It tells you how to do participatory budgeting, planning, expenditure monitoring, accountability, etc. So may konting pangiliti kung paano gawin yan. And we'll be most happy to train. Sana pwede nang pumunta sa mga areas. Pero kahit po online we can deploy. Pero sana po yung ang DILG i-ramp up pa itong participatory mechanisms na binabanggit ni Director Lisa. And i-update and i-promote yung paggamit ng full disclosure policy portal. Kasi diyan po uploaded dapat lahat yung mga forms, yung 12 to 14 financial reports of the LGUs. Sana po ay mas accessible rin yung sa BLGF na electronic statement of receipts and expenditures. Na quickly people can look at it. Tapos sana mas disaggregated pa para hindi lang, kasi po sa ngayon, wala pa rin yung, hindi ko pa makita yung item ng SEF mismo eh. General, tax collection na internally generated yung nakikita ko. One other, so CSOs must have access to the SEF and COA reports. Ang ganda ng sharing po ng ating DILG and DOF resource persons on the findings of COA on how it was utilized. Pero aggregate po yan eh. Aling munisipyo yung niligay sa high yield sa treasury bonds yung SEF money rather than use it for what is much needed. Ang isa pong magandang I think model for local school board participatory mechanism practice ay yung sa NAGA na they expanded the membership kasi pwede naman pong madagdagan yung members ng local school board para ma-include yung alumni associations, para mas maging active rin yung mga alumni associations ng mga eskwelahan. But wag naman sanang hingi lang ng hingi at mag-fundraise from the alumni association. I've been asking kasi po, yung mga nalalaman ko yung sitwasyon ng eskwelahan ko, pero sabi ko, patingin naman, saan nga ba ginagamit yung SEF ng ating munisipyo? Hindi rin makabigay, hindi nga po kilala ng teacher yung district superintendent. Yung gano'n, and who is the co-chair of the local school board. So gano'n ka-distant yung relasyon ng those who are sitting in the high up there in the local school board and those teacher na yan hindi hindi niya kilala. So quickly lang po, this doesn't just apply on the SEF but on the broad spectrum of the funds that we have to look at. Sana magamit ang equity lens, sana evidence-based. We should have data for poverty reduction, social services, access to determination. We must have participatory mechanisms, access to information of citizens, greater transparency and accountability. It's quite a mouthful, madaling sabihin pero mahirap gawin. But at this time, especially with COVID and the demand for new normal, we really need to have this. So to recap what the points that I mentioned, there are competing claims to local government resources. The problem is not just a question of getting a greater share to fund education expenditures, but enlarging the pie. It's difficult. Huwag tayong umasa lang sa Mandanas decision. Best to have a hard look at real property valuation, which funds the SEF, and let's support the property reform proposal of the Department of Finance. And CSOs must take an active role in their local school boards and demand transparency. Mahirap po yung let's not just shout ourselves hoarse. Let's try to be more active. Kausapin natin ng mayor, kausapin natin ng superintendent, kausapin natin yung konsihal that sits in the local school board as well. Take note po ha, ang SEF ay hindi dumadaan sa sangguniang bayan deliberations. So talaga pong hiwalay iyan na activity ng budgeting and planning, budgeting, etc. So dapat po ay may special attention rin tayong andyan. Just a final point, kasi nga po may competing demands. Nakita ko kanina yung isang teacher nagsasabi, pahingi ng laptop, pahingi ng Wi-Fi, sana Wi-Fi ready yung laptop. But in the end, even if we do all that, kahit may laptop, may Wi-Fi ready, lahat ng teachers and learners, if there is no connectivity, we cannot have that new normal. So sana po, again, it takes a village to raise a child, but we need to know what the problem is and we need to know how to solve it. Yung pong connectivity issue, kailangan lang merong isang executive order. The ICT must act on it. We don't need legislation for it in the meantime. Satellite lang po pwede na. Sana ay magawa yan. Kasi while DepEd is trying its darnest to make the schools safe, para mag-distribute ng materials which demands a lot of resources. Daming papel na kailangan. Mas maganda po sana kung may connectivity and then we can all study and learn in peace. Salamat po ng marami. Let's get more involved. Thank you po.
Thank you, Jack. Experience-based recommendations on how to make the pie bigger and bigger. Okay, thank you. For our next reactor, so she is OGP Steering Committee member and also the Executive Director of Unang Hakbang Foundation. And by the way, a lot of her experience before going to CSO is on banking. So may I call on Maria Olivia Lucas. We call her Oli. Oli, you have the floor now.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. Wait, I can't figure out. Okay. All right. All right. I shall be not as lengthy, hopefully not as lengthy, because we have already had a lot of discussions on everything. But maybe what I'd like to say is, I'm coming from Unang Hakbang Foundation, and Unang Hakbang, actually, we are an operating foundation and we help kids. We're providing tutorials for kids. So where I'm coming from is actually from the point of view of children. I know that there are a lot of other participants here from the teachers group or from the parents. I'm coming here from the point of view of kids. And actually, Jack has said that, if we got online, we would solve a lot of problems. I actually don't buy into that idea because whether or not you're online, like the whole of the learning continuity plan, to my mind, really is founded on the fact that you will have home-based education. So education right now, if it's in the home, we really are talking about a education that is going to be managed by the parent or by somebody in the home. And I think that is what we are not actually supporting, because of all of this discussion that we should be online. Even if you're online, the child has to have a instructional facilitator with her or with him. And especially if they're young, they have to be online with an adult. Maybe a grade 5 student can be responsible for their own learning, but regardless of, but however that is, somebody still has to be able to manage how she manages her own learning. So I think I'm very grateful to all of the speakers, to you, Jess, Annalisa, and Miss Pamela. It was a very good presentation. And Rolly Toledo, he is our friend in the OGP process. So as I said, where I'm coming from is that what I see the learning continuity plan right now is home-based learning. And I think what we should have is support for learning facilitators. That is not in the budget, or that is not even in the JMC. And I think if it is possible to actually include that, I think we should provide some stipends for learning facilitators. We should provide funds, for example, for a mother who will stay at home and maybe tutor her child and maybe the neighbor's child. No, provide her something, because she has to stay at home. You cannot make this another burden for that, for women. All right, especially, and so education has to be. They have to be at least be given a stipend. The mother who stays at home to tutor her child, and maybe another child, possibly another child, possibly not just who tutors her own child, but say who tutors one or maybe two or even three children, maximum of three children. We should also have equipment, instead of just talking about issuing computers. Your computers must have readers so that it can be used by I think we prioritize them when we give out computers to, blind children, so that they can have readers, so that they are not issued a self-learning module that is printed. They can be issued a self-learning module that the software is placed inside the computer, so that they can use it, and then they have a reader to read it to them. Additionally, all of those should have, even those self-learning modules, they can be issued also to those who are for deaf children, so that the computers themselves already have an FSL interpreter, so that as they read the material, as they go through the material, there is an interpreter that will read the pages for them. So I think those are some of the we talk about all computers. I think be very specific. The ones who really need maybe those gadgets right now are the ones who are are PWDs. So let's serve them first before all of the others, and give them computers that can speak to them, and then that can be used for their specific, that can be that can reduce their disability and equalize things for them. I think the other thing that has actually been brought out in this discussion is that we do not have a way of actually managing how much we are spending and who is spending for what. So you have, for example, both the SEF will go for construction of school buildings, will pay for MOEs, but then you have also the DepEd that has a budget for construction. The DepEd's budget for construction right now is in the 27 billion pesos, for school building, plus for the classroom, for their furniture and equipment. So we should have a way of actually matching this. You talk about feeding program. Both the DepEd and the DSWD have feeding programs in their budget, and which is about I think about 9 billion pesos for DSWD and DepEd itself. So how does that square with budgeting for SEF? I think maybe if DBM itself, or if it's the DOF, the BILG, should be able to, let's say, can we manage the way we budget our budget process, so that we can budget this on a more systematic way, so that we know it isn't a matter of DepEd is spending for construction, that the other guy is spending for this, but think in terms of the funds itself. They can both spend for construction, But how much of construction will be for DepEd and how much of construction will be for the municipalities? How do we? There should be a system so that we can organize what our needs are and then allocate them to to the agencies that are being given the funding. In the case also of the we've talked about participation in the LSB, in the local school boards. I think part of the problem there is that the local school boards should be getting the investment plans from the school-based management programs. And those school-based management programs, I think very few of them actually are functional, so that the budgets from schools cannot be elevated to the local school board. And I've actually done a review of a local school board during one of those ratings of the DILG. And the local school board provided funds for the construction of school buildings to a school which did not ask for a school building in their local in their school in their local school plans. No, another one that actually asked for a school building did not get a school building. So it's not a matter simply of CSOs being engaged. No, I think it's a matter also of schools themselves becoming more engaged, the principals engaging in the local school board process, and maybe the DILG requiring that the principals, bring in their school investment plans into the process so that that can be actually reviewed. Because at the moment, all we have are whatever it is that they think is best, and for the school, and it's not based upon the school investment plans. I think local school boards should be making the decisions on the basis of the school investment plan. And the school investment plan is a 3-year process, so you should actually be able to do this on a medium term on a medium term basis. And maybe if we did this, we can then be able to blend or merge the expenditures that Ed has for construction and then even for the MOE, and then what the DSWD is meant to spend even for the ECCD. I didn't realize that the Special Education Fund is now meant to fund also the ECCD project. But DSWD has a feeding program, which is about 4.5 billion. So how does that, how does that blend with even feeding out of the SEF? I mean, how many children do you want to feed? Okay, so then you have, let's say, maybe if you have to monitor the SEF, can we have a monitoring tool that actually reflects also the improvement of the students, how they rate, either in how they transition. If more children will transition from grade school to high school, then maybe that school should actually be given, that municipality should be rated well on the education process. I think I'm talking here about the Good Housekeeping award that's being given by the DILG. Shouldn't that be, also monitored? Not just the fact that they provide, the reports to the, to the Freedom of Information portal, but also that the kids that they have there will transition. More kids begin to transition to the high school. Now there is a level, at which schools must be able to transition their kids. There's no school, or there should be no school management that or school management should be made responsible for less than 50% of their children transitioning to high school, right? And then high schools should be made to account for, less than, let's say, 70% of their children transitioning even to college or being able to transition to a job. I think those kinds of ways of evaluating schools should be placed also when we talk about your SEF, and whether or not they deserve that SEF, and whether or not they're spending it properly. So it can't be simply that I spent 20% of this on here, but let us take a look at the outcomes. What's the outcome in that school? How are the children progressing there? Are there less? Are there more kids with disabilities that are being served, and that are being served adequately, that they can proceed to the next level? All right. And finally, I think I'd like clarification on when you talk about the, on the DepEd and DOF data, but I think that was also partly already addressed. But you have the full disclosure policy. You have the full disclosure policy. Let me tell you that the full disclosure policy board is actually so inadequate. All you have there is a listing of where they spent it, but there's nothing about outcomes. What does it do? What does it make? How does it evolve? No, and maybe in this case also, I'd like to ask Ms. Pam if you can make your data, no, in the website much easier to access. I tried to get data for the SEF, and I had to go through the hoops, in order to be able to finally, find the information on the SEF of every municipality and province. And the data was actually only 2018, I think. It's not updated up to 2019. But it was very difficult to access. So even if at that level, please, if you can actually also, make that also easier for us to be able to access information from the DOF. So I think that concludes all of my observation.
Okay, thank you, Ma'am Ollie, for a very, very practical recommendation. Okay, thank you. So just one from the participant, just make your presentation just very concise and sweet. So we will ask one from the participants from the teacher sector. So may I call on Fidel Paclablier, the Secretary General of ASERT. Capidel.
Unmute. Magandang hapon sa inyo lahat. Narinig ba ako, May?
Loud and clear, Capidel.
Sige. Nabanggit kanina ni Yusek Mateo na bago pag-usapan yung SEF, they attempted to look into the national budget, kung anong available. Kasi doon ibabatay sapagkat tama naman ang sinabi ng batas na yung Republic Act 5447 na lumikha ng SEF at saka ng local school board ay isa lang yan na scheme para sa ganon makatulong sa pagsasabalikat ng pasanin ng pambansang pananagutan sa edukasyon ang mga LGU. Yun po yung ginawa po ng national government. So pumalag po ang LGU at sinabi noon, noong 1968, saan namin kukunin ang karagdagang budget? Ayun, binigyan nga po sila ng Republic Act 5447 na nagbibigay kapangyarihan sa kanila na mag-levy ng additional 1% mula sa real estate tax na binabayaran taon-taon. Ngayon, kung totoo nga pong tiningnan ni na Yusek Mateo yung national budget, hindi, ba't wala po siyang in-report? Ang report po sa 2020 budget, ito po yung Republic Act 11465. Ito po yung General Appropriation Act. Dapat in-report po ni Yusek na meron pa lang malaking budget na available ngayong 2020. Ito po, Quick Reaction Fund. Ito po ay 2.1 billion para standby fund para sa mga nasirang eskwelahan na kinakailangang i-repair ngayong taong ito. So, ito po ay pwedeng i-realign kasi wala naman pong gagamiting mga eskwelahan, kung kaya dapat po ay i-realign ito. Meron din pong basic education facilities. Makikita sa Section 5 ng GAA, 29.58 billion. So, ang laki po nito. Ito po yung pwedeng panggalingan ng mga infra para sa interconnectivity at para sa mga gadget. Gayon din po, meron po ditong tinatawag na appropriation for teachers in service training na wala naman pong naganap nitong summer at malamang walang magaganap ngayong semestral break ngayong October, November sapagkat wala nga pong face-to-face learning. Ito po ay 779,263,000. Makikita po yan sa Section 11. Ngayon, yung pong GATSPE na government assistance to students in private education, since wala naman pong magaganap na face-to-face, 36.8 billion ito na pwede siya i-realign para sa mga sahod ng mga mawawalan ng trabaho na mga guro sapagkat sila po ay no work, no pay, lalo na sa mga distress school. Binibigyan namin din dito na only doon sa mga distress private school. Meron din pong tinatawag na miscellaneous personal benefit fund. ito po ay sinabi doon sa batas, section ito po 56 billion 57 0.57 billion na sinasabi gagamitin para sa mga probisyon ng Magna Carta ng mga teachers, ng mga nurses, ng mga social workers na sa panahong ito, yung budget year, ay may magaganap na mga kalamidad. Katulad nga po nitong COVID. Pero hanggang sa ngayon, nakakalungkot po, wala pa pong tinatanggap ni piso, ni isang kusing ang mga teachers sa anyo ng special hardship allowance, gayong meron naman pong 56 billion, 57 million. So, ito po, meron pa pong isang natitira dito. DepEd Agency Savings. For 2019, meron po palang savings. Ibig sabihin, ito yung mga Magna Carta benefits na sa halip na pagkunan doon, ay hindi binayaran ang mga teachers, kaya po nagka-generate po ng mga savings. At bahagi po ng 400 billion savings na yon, yun po yung mga natipid dahil sa yung hiningi ng budget ng DepEd para sa school building program at in-approve naman ay hindi na niya nagagamit, taon-taon po ito simula po noong 2016. Kung gayon, bakit po hindi nagamit? Kasi nga po pinagtuunan ng DepEd ang SEF na doon kukunin ang mga budget para sa repair and construction ng mga school building. Kaya makikita niyo yung data na present ng finance at saka ng DILG. Talaga nga pong nagkaroon po ng mga discrepancy o mga overspending para sa mga item na ayon sa batas ay hindi naman dapat bigyan ng ganong kalaking halaga. So yun po, meron pa pong unprogrammed appropriation na pwedeng pagkunan ng lahat ng mga pangangailangan sa education. Magkano po yan? 216 billion. So yun po yung mga national budget na bakit hanggang ngayon wala silang pronouncement kung dapat nga talaga transparency. Para sa ganun, malaman namin kung ano ang available at kung ano ang mga dapat na i-utilize na posibleng magamit ng mga teachers natin. Ngayon, dun po sa SEF, yung pong SEF ay maliwanag na po. Wala pong awayan doon sa sinasabi natin conflicting claims ng mga different sectors kung paano hahati-hatiin, babahagiin ang SEF. Maliwanag po sa batas. At bakit hindi nila binabanggit yung Letter of Instruction number 1462 na siyang nag-amyenda ng Republic Act 5447. At yan pong mga batas na yan, nandiyan na po yung tinatawag na specific allocation na sinabi 60% ng total collection ng SEF ay dapat mapunta sa mga benepisyo ng mga teachers at doon sa mga i-hire na mga additional teachers at non-teaching personnel. Maliwanag po yun, 60%. Pero hindi po nila ibinibigay yun. At yung natitirang 40%, doon pa lang po kukunin yung construction and repair, kukunin yung instructional materials, at doon po kukunin din yung mga tinatawag na improvement ng mga facilities. Wala na pong sports development. Kasi po, ang sports development po ay canceled na po. Kung gayon, i-realign din po dapat yun. At malaki po yun ang nakukuha sa SEF. Research. Yung research, pwede pang paglaanan. Pero paggawa siguro ng mga modules. Ngayon po, meron na pong desisyon. Ang COA, pag binasa nyo, yung December 3, 98-03 decision and bank decision ng COA. Ito po ay dinaluhan ni na dating Commissioner Celso Gangan, Raul Flores at saka ni na Sopronio Ursal. Sila in-bank po yun na sinasabi dapat nga sundin yung tinatawag na distribution ng mga percentage. Pero bakit po ang mga COA, resident COA na nakasuksok sa mga LGU, bakit po nila pinangungunahan at pinangingibabawan ang desisyon? May mga desisyon na po. May desisyon na po ang aming mga LGU. Pero
Capidel?
Yes.
Sige po. Okay na po muna. We're getting late na po. Na-address naman din po yung mga issue. Maraming salamat po sa may mga datos na i-present ninyo, Capidel. So kasi paumanhin po sa ating mga speakers saka sa participants na talagang nag-overtime na po tayo at napakadami kasi ng datos. Maraming salamat ka, Fidel, sa iyong mga pagbabahagi.
Salamat
Okay,
din,
so,
Mayor.
Opo. Ngayon po, bigyan naman natin ng siguro panahon yung ating apat na speaker just to have their summary of and also a response. Oo. Kung nandyan pa po ba ang ating mga main speaker. So siguro
Yes, ma'am.
Tapos and then we get to Jet for the challenges and final words. So can we get the feedback from Yusek Mateo, Asek Toledo, Director Bunagua, and Director Pam Quezon. So whoever
Yeah.
wanted to respond. Okay, thank you.
I'll start siguro, Ma'am May.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Yung first is yung inano ni Ma'am Jessica ng social work. Ang tanong niya kasi yung ano ba yung mga ida-download, no, because of the Mandanas case. Ang isang mga tinitignan dito yung sa school building nga. Sususugan ko na rin yung comment ni Capidel. Isa sa mga natanggalan ng budget sa 2020 dahil sa Bayanihan Act 1 ang DepEd po. Sa katunayan nga po, malaki-laking ilang bilyon po ang nawala para po doon sa pagpondo ng Bayanihan Act. Doon naman po sa comment ni Oli tungkol sa mga learning facilitator, sa katunayan nga po, isa po yan yung tinitignan namin, but we call it learning support aids. Na ito nga yung tulong po doon sa sakaling may mawawalan ng trabaho from the private schools. Kasi alam naman natin, nung May pa lang, alam na namin dahil ang Kokopeya humihingi ng saklolo sa ating pamahalaan. Ang estimate nga nila na nawalan sila ng close to about 55 million, tapos mawawalan ng maapektuhan about 250 if I'm not mistaken. If my memory serves me right, parang 250,000 to 300,000 ang humihingi ng ayuda. So ang ginawa po natin dyan, dinulog ng ating kalihim doon sa interagency task force yung kanilang concerns, no, about the private school. With regards to the yung mga iba pang comment, halimbawa yung issue na ni-raise ni Ma'am Oli about possible duplication ng mga financing, kaya nga po doon sa original SEF guidelines natin, I'm referring to Joint Circular 17 series of 2017, ginawa po natin dyan, may mga responsibility ang bawat ahensya, no, doon sa pagpaplano, pagmamonitor. Halimbawa po, nabanggit na rin naman yung school-based management. Nilatag natin to, I think si Ma'am Ana will confirm this from the ILG. Nilagay po natin dito that they should take into account the school improvement.
Inamin mo.
School
Dahil
improvement.
sa pinirmahan ni Duterte, sinimot yung pera na DepEd. Laki nang nawala daw.
Excuse me po, listen po tayo kay Yusek Mateo, please. Paki-unmute po yung ibang audio. Thank you.
Unmute yan.
It's the turn of Yusek Mateo to speak. Okay.
Naka-X ka?
Please.
Naka-X ka?
Mute lang.
Dapat.
Okay po. Thank you. Sige po, Yusek Mateo. Yusek Mateo, naka-mute po kayo? Naka-mute.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Naputol yata ako doon sa school improvement plan.
Yes,
doon
sir.
sa joint circular. Under item 5 of that joint circular, binanggit po natin dito yung planning and budgeting for SEF, kung saan po dapat i-ensure na yung school improvement plan, pati yung division education development plan are formulated collaboratively with the stakeholders and community. Kasi nga po yung prinsipyo natin sa DepEd, ito alam to ni Ma'am Flora, yung school-based management natin. Pangalawa po, doon sa reporting po natin, isang responsibility ng ating DepEd Schools Division Office ay yung pag-report no ng amount of resources allocated to individual schools from the annual appropriation. Ibig sabihin nito, yung budget na nakukuha nila sa DepEd no sa national government, kailangan iparating rin sa local government units para hindi po nasasayang yung talagang complementation ng SEF pati ng national budget. Doon naman, pasensya na kayo, hindi ko naman malalahat para to give way to the others. And then doon sa sinasabi ni Fidel, sabi ko nga kanina, may malaking budget na nawala sa DepEd. Hindi lang po DepEd, iba pa hong ahensya para po mapunuan yung tinatawag na Bayanihan Act 1. Alam naman po natin na medyo may problema rin ang ating pamahalaan when it comes to funding kasi nga yung ekonomiya natin medyo naapektuhan ng pandemya. And finally, that's the reason why when I mentioned about the financing of the local the learning continuity plan, we're not only looking at the budget that we have right now, but reviewing it the same. For example, yung ating tama yon, yung school building program natin, bagamat nabawasan na natin po yan, pero hindi naman po pwede nating mahinto yan kasi once magkaroon ng vaccine at magkaroon ng face-to-face, kailangan pong kumpinihin natin yung mga silid-aralan na yan. In fact, nangangailangan kami ng mas malaking na pondo para po sa pagbibili ng mga gadgets, pagkagawa ng mga health facilities like hand washing, mga clinics, toilets, and so on. Yun po yung katotohanan po doon. Pagdating naman po doon sa GASPE, nire-retain po namin yan kasi ang sabi nga ng private school, huwag nyo naman kami pabayaan, kasama kami sa DepEd. Kaya po yung hinihingi po natin na GASPE budget, ma-include, ma-expand po to doon sa iba pang mga schools po para yung ating mga mag-aaral ay magpatuloy po ng pag-aaral. Salamat po. Doon na lang muna ako.
Maraming salamat, Yusek Mateo. Unang-una for keeping with us at saka dun sa mga sagot. Now, can we ask for Asek Toledo?
Oh yes, thank you very much, Ms. May, and thank you for all the reactors, kay Ma'am Jessica, kay Ma'am Oli, tsaka kay Fidel. Okay. Okay, unahin ko lang po yung kay Ma'am Jessica. Actually, I think I took note of the 5 points, but I will focus on the very first, okay? Which is, sabi nga niya, is there are a lot of competing claims of local government resources. But so totoo lang po, hindi lang for the local government, but also for the national government agencies, for the government, especially sa atin. So just like a local government, we have a competing claims as far as yung mga demands from our department agencies or implementing agencies. As a matter of fact, halos minintin natin lahat yung to operate except for the one we use for the COVID responses, minintin po natin yung mga regular operations of the government. And despite na di tayo nakakakolekta ng magandang revenue, we even maintain our disbursement. As a matter of fact, dahil nga po dyan, hindi lalong bumaba yung ating growth as economy kasi ang nag-contribute doon yung ating government consumption or expenditure. And because of that, we increase even our deficit target from a 3.2% of GDP. Yung programa po yan, now it's already at 9.6% of GDP just to make sure that our programs and projects will be funded by the government. Okay, so that's one point. Susugan ko lang yung sinabi ni Yusek Mateo kanina na dahil nabawasan po yung budget po ng DepEd, but it's only that DepEd. Okay, marami po because of the Bayanihan Law and because of this we want to respond to COVID, nakapagbigay po na tayo ng around 374.8 billion. Okay, allotment and 360.5 billion cash allocation for that. Okay. Marami po tayo, just like ang pinakamalaking response po natin diyan ay yung pagbibigay po natin ng social amelioration program, which range up umabot po ng 200 billion. So aside from that, marami po tayong mga programang na pinondohan just for the response for COVID, like for example yung tupad ng DOLE, okay, at saka yung agricultural program ng ALPAS or contra COVID program ng agriculture, at saka yung ating mga support sa mga small business SMEs. So yan po yung isang program. But sabi nga ni Yusek Mateo din, given this also this kind of problem natin ngayon sa kasalukuyan, DBM continue to work with the Department of Education in ensuring the education continuity and health crisis by providing funding support still for basic education program to help, of course, our students, parents, and teachers adapt to the multiple learning delivery modes such as distance learning and blended learning that we are talking about right now in relation to our SEF. So, binibigyan pa rin natin. And moving forward, sa katunayan po, just to make sure, alam po natin na education is one of the highest budget every year po yan. So, if we're speaking of the increasing the pie or enlarging the pie, every year po, ang number one na budget na allocation goes to education sector. Okay. Kaya kasi mandato rin po ng ating constitution yan na we have to provide for our education as the highest budget every year. Okay. Now, gusto ko lang mag-react din po doon sa banggit ni Fidel kanina about the unprogrammed appropriations po. Okay. Ang unprogrammed appropriations na tinatawag tama is a standby fund. Kaya lang po may condition po yun. Okay. Bago mo matap po yun ang program appropriation, may dalawang kondisyon. Dapat po may excess revenue ka at may dapat excess revenue. Ngayon, tanong po, paano ka magkakaroon ng excess revenue given the situation of the pandemic? As a matter of fact, na-close ang mga businesses po natin. At the same time, nahirapan tayong mangolekta ng mga taxes. So, in that case, hindi natin matap po yun ang program appropriation. Except for those program or projects that are funded out of foreign assisted projects na may kontrata na loan, may contract na perfected na pwede na nating itap because those are projects na hindi nalagay sa appropriations. It is because wala pa siyang perfected contract. Okay? So yun po yung sa bahagi ko po sa DBM, we're making sure that every penny that we spend are really allocated to where, kumbaga sabi nga nila, we put our money where our mouth is, kung saan kailangan. So we really prioritize given the demand or given the what we call competing claims in the budget.
Thank you.
Okay. Ma'am May, a
Okay.
quick intervention lang. I'd like to affirm and confirm as well as thank ASEC Rolly, Toledo. Totoo po yun, ilang beses na kami nag-meeting, suportado po tayo ng DBM dyan. In fact, no less than Secretary Abisado, supported, and the whole DBM team supported yung ating request for additional funding para sa ganon ma-implement natin yung learning continuity plan natin. Thank you.
Yusek Mateo, if I may ask, magkano po ba ang projected budget natin ngayon sa DepEd given this pandemic?
Yung sa ngayon po, binigyan tayo ng, if I'm not mistaken, additional 10 billion, 9 billion of which dinownload na natin sa mga school po. Pasensya na kayo, hindi kasi ako sa finances.
Okay lang po.
Pero mas malaki, at the very least, yung mga request natin noon na contribution ng lahat ng ahensya, no, ng pamahalaan sa Bayanihan Act 1, hindi naman lahat po ng pwede binigay natin. Yung iba po talagang pinotect natin in relation to the learning continuity plan. Sa katotohanan, ma'am, mas malaki pa nga hinihingi natin, pero alam niyo naman si Secretary Briones being a finance person, hindi naman siya unreasonable eh. Tinitingnan din po niya kausapin ng revenues ng ating pamahalaan.
Yusek, i-compile ko na lang kasi may tanong kaugnay dyan sa Learning Continuity Plan. Please bear the two directors, the two women beautiful directors. May tanong kasi sa chat group sa Facebook concerning do sa teacher. So baka mas maganda rin pong masagot na agad. Kasi yung mga concern ng teachers, ngayon po yung sila po ba kasi ang concern nila ay gagawa sila ng activity sheets. So, sila po ba yung gagastos daw doon sa mga papel, sa printing and everything? So, ganun-ganun po. Sagutin nyo na po at sa internet. Sige po.
Kagaya ng nabanggit ko, dinownload na po natin about 9 billion, no? Doon sa mga field offices natin para nga po walang gastos yung mga guro natin.
Okay.
Maliban po doon, ang ating mga lokal na pamahalaan ay nag-support rin doon sa mga schools. One example is Bataan, Tarlac. They procured the production materials. They provided mga supplies and materials.
Plus na botas ata, ni Marimbote.
Yes po. Yung sa Nabotas, ewan ko kung nakita niyo yon.
Nakita po namin.
Yung sa Nabotas, kung mapapansin niyo po, yung pag-deliver po ng mga learning nabo box, no, na tawag natin, hindi po DepEd yun eh. Ang local government po mismo ang naghatid sa kanila dahil alam nga nila yung mga limitation rin ng DepEd.
May pahabol kasi kanina sa umpisa natin, nagtatanong yung ating mga learners with disability, magiging disability friendly po ba ang ating mga learning materials?
Yes, definitely po. Kaya nga po yung mga materials natin din po, nire-review po yan ng natin nung sa curriculum and instruction group. We made sure na yung ating special learners with special needs po, matugunan din po natin. Meron po tayong grupo na tumututok po dyan.
Okay, thank you, Yusek. And now may we hear kay Director Annalisa Banagua from DILG, ma'am. Hello po.
Opo. Marami po doon sa mga ni-raise na mga tanong at saka mga issues ay nasagot na. So doon na lang po ako sa hindi pa nasasagot. Tungkol po doon sa complementation and non-duplication, so we do agree, kasama po naman din yun sa aming suggestion na may clear parang expenditure and revenue assignment responsibilities. Ano ba dapat ang pinupondohan ng, let's say, ng DepEd, ng probinsya, city, and municipio. So lagi po namin yung parang pinagtutuunan ng pansin pagka po ginagawa natin yung mga JMC. Yun nga po yung laging ng balitaktakan between DILG, DepEd at saka DBM. Pagka sinabi na ito ay pondo na pinupondohan na ng DepEd, hindi na dapat o kailangan pa ba na pondohan din ng SEF. So may mga ganung diskusyon. Expanding the allowable expenditure, yung tungkol sa learners with disability. Actually po, kung kasi nga generic naman as of with the current law that we have, generic nakalagay operations and maintenance of schools. So kung kasama ang special education, ang SPED sa maintenance and operation of schools, yung support for learners with disability, pwede yung maisama sa mga pwedeng suportahan ng special education fund. Kailangan lang siguro ayusin po sa guidelines. Tungkol po doon sa pag-include ng education concern tungkol in the seal of good local governance. Ngayon po, may bago pong batas, RA 11292. Ito po yung Seal of Good Local Governance Act. At ito po, in-expand po yung coverage area for the assessment of the performance ng local government units. Naging 10 na po, na dating 7 lang. Ito po sa 10, napasama po yung Program for Sustainable Education. So may specific thematic area na ang mga support ng local government units for education in the assessment of the performance of local governments. So ito po, dahil bago lang yung law, 2019, ngayon po binabalangkas namin ang IRR Hindi lang po nagkaroon ng assessment ngayong taon dahil nga po sa COVID, pero ang sisimulan po uli yung assessment ng performance ng local governments at nakasama na po ang Program for Sustainable Education as one of the criteria for the performance of local government units. Tungkol naman po, na-raise po yung tungkol sa Supreme Court ruling tungkol sa on the Mandanas petition. Ang national government po, DBM, DILG, at saka iba pang national oversight agency ay nag-uukol na ng pansin at nagpe-prepare na para sa implementation nito by 2022. So, tinitingnan na po kung saan kukunin yung kinakailangang budget para sa matugunan yung sinasabi na requirement under the law that all national taxes, so 40% will be the basis for the internal revenue allotment. So lalaki po yung allocation for local government. Siyempre po, maghahanap naman si national government saan niya kukunin yan. So marami pong national government units ang matatapisan ng budget para po ma-increase naman yung internal revenue allotment ng local government. So pinagpe-preparahan na po ito at may mga capacity building program po na inihahanda para maayudahan naman yung mga local governments para sa pag-perform nila ng mga new function na ngayon ay ginagawa pa ng national governments. Yung mga iba pong mga suggestion kanina, some of those will need amendments of the local government code. So, dahil CSO community po tayo, siguro maging kasama tayo sa pag-advocate for the legislation. At yung mga kaya naman pong sagutin via policies and guidelines ng DILG, DepEd at saka DBM. Umasa po kayo, natutugunan namin ito sa mga susunod na policy. Ngayon po, ang dami nang lumalabas. So, meron ng 2020-1, 2020-2, binubuo. Baka yung mga iba pa na gusto pang maisama na nakapaloob din naman sa kasalukuyang batas, pwede po natin isama. Kaya lang, pag-isipan din natin na ang SEF naman ay hindi naman lumalaki ang budget. So, ganun pa rin siya. Kaya, yun din, kailangan natin i-balance. Kahit gusto natin na marami yung maisama na pwedeng pondohan. Ang lagi din namin iniisip, maliit naman ang pondo na ito para sa ibang mga, lalo na sa mga lower income municipalities. Yun lang po.
Maraming salamat, Director Banagua. At malaki yung sinasabi ninyong recommendation na kanina. Taking note po dyan. Okay, thank you po. And Director Pham Quezon.
Yes, Ma'am May.
Yes, thank you.
We'll make this short and but sweet. Okay.
Short
Ma'am
and
Jack,
sweet.
yes, Ma'am Jack, thank you so much for hearing you that you are supporting the Real Property Valuation Reform Act. Thank you for using our slides. Meron po pala kaming napag-sharean at nakikita nila yung mga lecture namin na yung real property tax, which is the lifeblood of the local government units. Napapansin nyo po, dwindling na po yan in RPT share. Bakit po? Ano daw yung reason? Sabi ni Ma'am Jack, hindi niya masabi kanina. Reason is the failure of the LGUs to regularly update the real property tax schedule of market value. Bakit po? Anong main reason? Political suicide po yan. Every 3 years ang election. Bakit po ako magre-revise? Bad po yan. Every election year. Talaga pong may politics side. And aminado naman po talaga tayo. Kaya our proposal, take the politics side away from the LGUs. Let them handle assessment level and tax rate. Yung pong pag-revise ng schedule of market value, sana po sa Department of Finance na mapunta. We also would like to acknowledge, also I think this is also the comment of Ma'am Oli earlier, more disaggregated, more granular data that will help our policymakers. Yes, we're hearing you. And I know that we will be having partnership more on for NGOs and for UNICEF. May partnership din po kami talking about disaggregated and more granular data. Maraming salamat, Ma'am Oli, for telling us that it's very difficult to access our data. Ito po yung mga comments na gusto naming marinig. Bakit? Because this will improve our service. Hindi lang po sa hirap ng pag-access ng data. Kapag nilabas mo yung data at puro table siya, ano ito? Di ko to naiintindihan. So ano pong gagawin ng BLGF in the next 2 months? More infographics. Yung pong maiintindihan ng public. Hindi po puro numero lang siya. Puro tables lang siya. Kasi hindi talaga yan maintindihan pag binigay namin yan sa public. Infographics. Sana ma-invite namin kayo kung ano pong klaseng infographics ang gusto nyong lumabas sa aming website. Yes, we'll make it user-friendly sa susunod po. At the end will be kaakibat, kasama nyo po kami for making this data more transparent, transparency and accountability for the use of the fund. Sabi ko nga po kanina, we're very grateful already kahit hindi po kami kasama doon sa signatory doon sa JMC on the use of fund, but you gave us an opportunity to discuss and be made part of the discussion. Maraming salamat po, Ma'am May.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Pam. Very passionate talaga si Ma'am Pam. And we will wait for the invitation, Ma'am Pam. Yes. Okay, bear with us, speakers. Sandaling-sandali na lang po kasi meron tayong ritual mamaya para sa inyo. So now we hear ang aming active na active ito sa INET. At siyempre sa sarili niyang organization, malaki. Biro mo, World Vision, ang binivision nila ay mundo, no? World Vision. So, si Jet po ay matagal ng, naging board din po siya ng INET Philippines. At ngayon ay isang aktibo talaga siyang manager, program manager ng Brigada Pagbasa. Kung may Brigada eskwela ang DepEd, ang World Vision naman ay may Brigada Pagbasa, no? Para tulungan ang ating mga mag-aaral sa kanilang pagbabasa. Anyway, at saka higit po dyan sa lahat, siya din ang education, technical manager ng World Vision Foundation for the synthesis, final words, and challenge. Let's hear from Jomel Getonso of World Vision, or we call him sweetly as Jet. Hello, Jet, it's your floor.
Magandang hapon sa lahat. Rinig ba ako, Ate May?
Oh, very clear, Jet.
Okay, sige. So maraming pong salamat sa ating mga resource person, no, at sa ating mga tagapakinig din sa mga webinar na to. Malaki pong tulong yung kanilang mga naibahagi sa atin to walk us through of the guidelines and policies that we need to take into account in the utilization of SEF to support the implementation of DepEd Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan. Maraming salamat po, DepEd USEC Jess Mateo, kay Director Annalisa Bunagua, to our ASEC Rolando Toledo, and Director Ms. Pamela Quizon from DOF. And as this event comes to a close, I would like to share with you yung aking takeaway from this session. Sinamarize ko to into 3 P's. No? Kung ang DSWD may 4 P's tayo, may 3. May 3 P's tayo. So yung unang P natin dito ay talks about policy. No? Alam natin na itong mga ginagawa natin lahat ay naka-angkla natin sa mga pulisiya na ibahagi sa atin kaya natin mga resource person. At alam natin na yung mga policies and frameworks shared by our speakers are proofs of our government's commitment to promote the right of our children to quality of education. Sabi nga ng ating mahal na kalihim, Secretary Dilimog Torres Briones, education must continue kahit pa may crisis tayo ngayon. However, any policy won't work if the process starts at enactment. Because there's a wide range of people and organizations that can be involved in the implementation depending on the level of enactment, no? Kung national ba or local, and the type of policy. Kaya kailangan po nating magtulungan upang itong mga pulisiyang ito ay talagang magawa at matupad natin at ma-achieve natin kung ano ba yung nilalayo ng mga pulisiyang pinag-uusapan natin. At ngayon, ito ang SEF. Maganda na lahat tayo ay naging aware na kasi yun nga yung usap-usapan kanina, marami pang mga hindi, ano ba SEF? Saan ba ito galing? Paano ba? At maraming salamat sa ating mga speakers sa pagbibigay linaw kung ano-ano ba ito mga ito. Dito naman, sa pag-implement din ng policy, maraming stakeholders ang pwedeng tumulong sa atin. Yung pagiging bukas ng bawat isa upang tumulong sa ating gobyerno, sa ating mga partners at the community level upang maitulak yung ating mga pagbabagong gusto makamit. At the end of the day, ang ating mga kabataan naman ang makikinabang nito. Pangalawang letter P po ay platform. May narinig akong kasabihan ba or phrase, sabi nila, when you build it, they will come. No? Sabi lang dito, in order for you to really promote community participation, you must provide a platform upon which community members can showcase their talents, their expertise to contribute and address the gaps that they see to improve the quality of their lives. So in the case of World Vision and DepEd and other partners, we have 2 projects right now. Ito yung major, yung ating Brigada Pagbasa and Abutin Natin. Ito yung mga platform na pwede nating i-showcase in the context of partnership para suportahan ang DepEd, ang ating mga LGUs at ang ating mga kabataan, lalong-lalo na sa pagpo-promote ng quality education. At itong mga project na to ay hindi lamang ito basta proyekto because this is a partnership innovation to synergize partner resources to support DepEd, help our learners have an improved learning outcomes. Indeed, this is a game changer with the way we work together because instead of spreading ourselves too thinly, pwede natin i-direct na lang sa mga platforms na to yung ating mga suporta para po talaga makarating doon sa mga target nating mga beneficiaries or recipients. So, pangatlong letter P na nais kong ibahagi ngayong hapon ay participation. Diba? Sinasabi nga lagi natin kanina, there is no one-size-fits-all approach to solve any problem. But through our active participation, we can push this advocacy to promote the rights of a child, especially the marginalized ones, to quality education, even in times of crisis, to the spotlight and facilitate alliance and bring about cooperative change. Sa pagpupush po ng pagbabago, we don't need to look too far because the answers are within us. When we work together, we can get positive results. Kailangan nating tingnan paano ba tayo makatulong, sa aspeto ba tayo pwedeng maging bukas at pwedeng tumanggap ng tulong. Sa panahon po ngayon, hindi na pwedeng puro na lang tayo po na. Dapat po ay may kaakibat po itong pagkilos sa pamamagitan ng paggamit ng tamang mekanismo upang matugunan ang ating mga kakulangan at mga problemang ating nakikita. Bilang mga CSO partners, katuwang INET, ang World Vision po ay isa sa ating mga government agencies para tumulong upang talagang i-promote ang well-being ng ating mga bata sa pamamagitan ng mga proyektong aming ini-implement. Hindi po namin magagawa ito ng kami lang. Talagang kailangan natin ang partisipasyon po ng lahat. So, sabi nga ng mga kapartners namin, when everybody is involved, possibilities become a reality. At dito rin po sa konteksto ng Synergy, sinasabi rin na a whole is greater than the sum of its parts. If we will spread ourselves too thinly, mahihirapan po tayong ma-achieve yung minimiti po ng pagbabago. Pero kung tayo po yung magsasama-sama, makakasiguro po tayo na yung mga problema, yung mga issues natin nakikita ay matutugunan. Hindi man agad-agad, pero with our consistent and concerted efforts, we will be able to drive this innovation forward. So sa akin pong pagtatapos, I believe that everyone can contribute for the success and for the welfare of our students. Malaki na organisasyon, may magagawa po tayong lahat. Ang kailangan lang po natin ay maging bukas at maging tumulong sa ating mga ahensya at sa ating mga partners upang makamit natin yung minimiti nating pagbabago. Sa ating mga kapwa Pilipino, I encourage you to do your part in helping our children to attain and finish their education. Ngayon, marami tayong nakikitang mga opportunities, resources that we can mobilize, but we are also aware that there are gaps that we need to address. Kaya hinihiling po natin ang iyong partisipasyon, kailangan po natin magtulungan, kailangan po natin silang tulungan, abutin ang kanilang mga pangarap. Yun lang po at marami pong salamat sa pagkakataong ito. Mabuhay po ang DepEd, mabuhay ang INET, mabuhay ang ating mga partners, mabuhay po tayong lahat, pagpalain po tayo. Maraming pong salamat.
Salamat, Jeff. At mabuhay ang OGP.
Yes, partnership with ating mga iba't ibang ahensya.
Okay. Sige, maraming salamat, Jeff. At ngayon, konti na lang, mag-e-end na talaga tayo. May I call on Flora? Flora, okay ka na? Flora, to give acknowledgement to our speakers. Nakapasok. Flora, are you there? Flora? Wala ata si Flora. Maybe Michelle, Daryl, or Dessa. Can you please flash the certificate? On behalf of Flora, mukhang nagka-problema daw yung kanyang internet connection. I'll do her part na lang po. Okay, so hindi ko mabasa. Medyo palakihan pa ng konti, please. Sorry. So, dahil virtual tayo, so medyo virtual din po ang acknowledgement. Unang-una, on behalf of OGP, Education Cluster, and of course, in partnership with Inet Philippines, sobrang nagpapasalamat kami sa inyo and you really spend time with us. Ang haba ng session natin, overtime tayo. And then, you really prepared for this webinar. Madaming informasyon tayong na-share galing sa inyo. So, really, dalawang hand na saludo yan. Okay, eto muna po. Gusto sana ni Flora itong gawin pero mukhang nagka-problema. So, the OGP Education Cluster and Inet Philippines award this certificate of recognition to Dr. Jesus Lorenzo Ruiz Mateo, Undersecretary, Planning Service and Bureau of Human Resources and Organizational Development, Department of Education, in grateful acknowledgement of his distinguished public service and insightful contribution as resource speaker during the webinar series of the Open Government Partnership CSO Education Group on domestic resource mobilization through the utilization of the Special Education Fund for the learners in the Last Mile School. Given this 13th of August 2020, Manila, Philippines, signed by Flora C. Arellano, President, Inet Philippines, lead organization for OGP CSO Education. And later will be signed, really signed, not only a e-signature by ASEC Roland Toledo, and we thank him for this, of the Department of Education. Okay, so wait lang ang announcement from Claire of DBM. They will send really the certificate to you. Okay, so let's give a big clap to Yusek Mateo. Thank you po, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you rin po.
Okay, so next please. Nandito na daw po si Miss Flora. Ma'am Flora, will you do the honor of giving the certificate? Flora, okay ka na?
Okay.
Okay.
First
Sige
of all,
po.
thank you very much kay Yusek Jess, sa ating kaibigan sa loob ng DepEd. So this
Lagi
time, oo nga sir, tinapos natin yung aking nagpapasalamat ako sa lahat ng mga speakers natin dahil they stayed talaga hanggang matapos itong ating webinar. Maraming salamat po sa inyong muli. Now, I would like to give the certificate of recognition to our very own Rolando U. Toledo, Assistant Secretary, Department of Budget and Management, Head, Philippine Open Government Partnership Secretariat, in grateful acknowledgement of his distinguished public service and insightful contributions as resource speaker during the webinar series of the Open Government Partnership CSO Education Group on domestic resource mobilization through the utilization of the Special Education Fund for the learners in the Last Mile Schools. Given this 13th August 2020, Manila, Philippines, signed by Ms. Flora Arellano, President Inet Philippines, lead organization OGP CSO Education, and Ms. Maria Olivia S. Lucas, President Unang Hakbang Foundation, NCR Representative, Philippine OGP National Steering Committee. Palakpakan po natin.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for the support.
Thank you very much for inviting us. Thank you, Ma'am Flora.
Salamat po.
Thank you.
And then the next, may sino pa ba sa susunod?
Naka-plus na Flora sa screen.
Okay.
Can you read it?
Yes. Okay. Ang CSO Education Cluster in the Philippines awarded certificate of recognition to Dr. Annalisa F. Bonagua, Director, Bureau of Local Government Development, Department of Interior and Local Government, as our resource speaker in grateful acknowledgement of her distinguished public service and insightful contributions as resource speaker during the webinar series of the Open Government Partnership CSO Education Group on Domestic Resource Mobilization through the utilization of the Special Education Fund for the learners in the last insightful contributions. Given this 13th August 2020, Manila, Philippines, signed by Ms. Flora Arellano and by by ASEC, Rolando U. Toledo, Department of Budget and Management, Head Philippine Open Government Partnership Secretariat. Palakpakan po natin.
Maraming pong salamat.
Maraming salamat po,
for how I wish
Director Annalisa. Kasama rin po natin si Director Annalisa Bonagua sa Literacy Coordinating Council as the Vice Chair ng LCC.
Salamat. Maraming pong salamat.
Thank you po. Now, CSO Education Cluster, Inet Philippines award the certificate of recognition to Miss Maria Pamela P. Quezon, Director 2, Bureau of Local Government Finance, Department of Finance. In grateful acknowledgement of her distinguished public service and insightful contributions as resource speaker during the webinar series of the Open Government Partnership CSO Education Group on Domestic Resource Mobilization through the utilization of the Special Education Fund for the learners in the last mile schools. Given this 13th August 2020, Manila, Philippines, signed Ms. Flora Arellano, President Inet Philippines, Lead Organization OGP CSO Education, and ASEC Rolando U. Toledo, Department of Budget and Management, Head Philippine Open Government Partnership Secretariat. Palakpakan po natin.
Thank you so much po. Maraming salamat po for inviting us.
Thank you for the very informative sharing of insights.
Okay, so malapit na tayong Sige, Flora, please.
Sa ating mga panelists, CSO Education Cluster in Philippines award the certificate of recognition to Ms. Jessica Reyes Cantos, President Action for Economic Reforms, co-convener Social Watch Philippines. In grateful acknowledgement of her distinguished public service and insightful contributions as panel of reactor during the webinar series of the Open Government Partnership CSO Education Group on Domestic Resource Mobilization through the utilization of the Special Education Fund for the learners in the last mile schools, given 13th August 2020, Manila, Philippines, signed by Ms. Flora Z. Arellano and ASEC Rolando U. Toledo, the Department of Budget and Management, Head Philippines Open Government Partnership Secretariat. Palakpakan po natin si Ms. Jack Santos. Ms. Jack Santos, andiyan pa ba?
Thank you, Flora. Cantos po ako, hindi Santos.
Cantos. Yeah.
Cuatro Cantos, not Vilma Santos.
Ibali, Jack, tama naman sa certificate.
Tama naman. Thank you, Flora, OGP, and the others.
Okay.
Thank you po.
CSO Education Cluster in the Philippines award the certificate of recognition to Ms. Maria Olivia S. Lucas, President Unang Hakbang Foundation. In grateful acknowledgement of her distinguished public service and insightful contributions as panel of reactor during the webinar series of the Open Government Partnership CSO Education Group on Domestic Resource Mobilization through the utilization of the Special Education Fund for the learners in the last mile schools. Given this 13th August 2020, Manila, Philippines, signed by Flora C. Arellano, President Inet Philippines, Lead Organization OGP CSO Education, and ASEC Rolando U. Toledo, Department of Budget Management, Head Philippine Open Government Partnership Secretariat. Palakpakan po natin. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Oli. And then we have also, next please. We have also a certificate of recognition awarded to Mr. Jomel P. Jetonso, the Brigada Pagbasa Program Director, World Vision Development Foundation, as the closing speaker during the webinar series of the Open Government Partnership CSO Education Group on domestic resource mobilization through the utilization of Special Education Fund for the learners in last mile schools. Given this 13th August 2020, Manila, Philippines, signed by Ms. Flores Arellano and ASEC Rolando U. Toledo, Department of Budget and Management, Head, Philippine Open Government Partnership Secretariat. Palakpakan po natin, Jet. Thank you very much. Andiyan pa ba si Jet? Okay.
Yes po. Salamat, Ate Flora.
Okay, thank you, Jet.
Okay, so with that, so on behalf of OGP, Education Cluster, and also Inet Philippines, we would like really to thank you for keeping with us. Grabe, ang haba ng webinar natin, pero napaka-insightful, napaka-fruitful. So salamat din po sa lahat ng mga participants for keeping with us. At yung mga nasa chat box nyo po, magdo-document po tayo ng proceedings na ito. Bigyan nyo lang kami ng ilang araw to consolidate everything, and then we will share the documentation to you as our way of acknowledging your participation. So, announcement lang po, nakalagay na sa chat box yung ating evaluation form. So, kayo na po ang bahalang mag-fill up. And for the meantime, dahil distansya man tayo, pwede ding magkalapit. Sabi nga ni Joey Ayala, tayo may magkalayo, pwede pa rin magkakalapit ang puso. So, photo ops na po, pakibuksan po ang inyong mga video at tayo ay magpo-photo documentation naman. Daryl, Michelle, and Dessa. So I would also like to thank the full support of Inet staff for keeping us on air, no? Yung mga batang techie natin behind the scenes. So Daryl, Michelle, and Dessa, please do the photo documentation. So pakibukas po ang inyong mga video para sa ating photo ops. And please give us a sign na para hindi kami mangawit mangiti. Kung 1, 2, 3, kung okay na. Okay, please.
May, yung mga speakers natin, sana andyan pa rin.
Opo, andyan pa sila. Andyan pa sila. Nakikita ko po.
They are here.
Okay. Yeah, they are there.
Thank you, sir.
So, mga ilang frames tayo? Ilang frames?
3 frames po.
Okay. So, bear with us. Wag tayo ngayong ibigay natin ang ating ngiti for a matter of minutes siguro dahil 3 frames daw po to get us photo documented. So, bigyan nyo lang kami ng cue kung 1, 2, 3 para ngingiti na kami. Okay. Okay. Hello, Michelle. Ang susi lahat, i-smile kami kasi hindi namin alam kung saan kaming frame. Sige. Naka-close? Wala na sila? Ayaw mag-photo. Okay, sige. Thank you very much. So, again and again, thank you.
Thank you, Oli.
Oli, thank you.
Thank you, ASEC
Thank you po
Oli.
Thank you, Yusek Jess.
Yusek Jess.
Oli.
Thank you.